Yes, so I think we can start now. It's time. It's 6 o'clock. So thank you all for joining. I wholeheartedly thank you all for being here today with us. I welcome you all to the symposium on celebrating life and works of Dr. T.D. Singh, founder director, Bhaktivedanta Institute. I am Dipankar Sharma, host for this event today. And today, on this auspicious day of the appearance of Dr. T.D. Singh, we are gathered here to celebrate him and his works in this exciting program with eminent scientists, scholars, and religious leaders from across the world. So without any further delay, I would like to invite...
Dipankar, you are muted.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. So I was muted. Okay, so I welcome all of us, all of you in this symposium today. We are already on time. I'm so sorry. I always delivered the welcome speech and I was muted. But yeah, I welcome all of you to this symposium on celebrating life and works of Dr. T.D. Singh, founder director, Bhaktivedanta Institute. Today, on this auspicious day of his appearance of Dr. T.D. Singh, we are gathered here to celebrate him and his works in this exciting program with eminent scientists, scholars, and religious leaders from across the world. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Shri Vasudev Raoji for opening and welcome address. So Shri Vasudev Raoji, President Bhaktivedanta Institute. Yes.
Brahma bhuta prasannatma na sochati na kankshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate para. The transcendentalist, being delighted in the divinity, neither laments nor desires. Therefore, he is equally disposed to all beings. In that state, one attains transcendental love of God. Distinguished speakers, participants, friends, well-wishers, and students of Dr. Singh, Dr. T.D. Singh, with the organizing committee of the symposium, are delighted to welcome you all to this wonderful evening, celebrating the life and works of Dr. T.D. Singh, a scientist and a saint, as we have read in the invocation, a Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, who walked amongst us. His pleasing personality is immediately evident from his beautiful smile, glanced equally upon everyone. A simple man in the village could relate with him with warm feelings and with a sense of belongingness. So could the Nobel Laureate in the world's top university. You are a scientist, a writer, a singer, a composer, a performing artist, a peacemaker, a monk. How are all these possible, Dr. Singh? Exclaimed a Nobel Laureate from Caltech. Unknown to us, how such a great scientist and saint moved amongst us like simple man, without ever announcing his qualifications, exclaimed a villager. Professor Richard Ernst remarked that Dr. Singh is a role model on how to think and behave in the academic world. Dr. Singh is an astonishing combination of scholarship, talent, and humility. Dr. Singh used to teach by his example that humility is the ornament of a learned person. By the age of 12, Dr. Singh was left alone due to loss of parents, due to his humble nature. Not wanting to be burdened on relatives, he lived on his own, tilting the land left by his father. Conducting his household activities alone, Dr. Singh knows the hardships of being alone, but never shied away from hard work, which eventually earned him scholarship to study PhD in USA. Dr. Singh believed in hard work and then good luck for success. Dr. Singh is endowed with patience, tolerance, and determination. when he was still a boy, he contracted typhoid and doctors declared him going to die, but Dr. Singh, with determination, by the advice of a naturopathy doctor, fasted for 40 days on way and miraculously recovered. Dr. Singh was non-complaining in nature. When he was given oil instead of a tonic to drink, he just drank without complaining and kept silent. When the servant realized his mistake, he could understand what a noble human being Dr. Singh is. And Dr. Singh was conducting experiments for his PhD at University of California. Contrary to his expectations, he noticed decrease in reaction rate with increase in temperature. Without manipulating the data, he reported to the advisor. This particular experiment led to a new theory under special circumstances, and his honesty earned him his PhD degree. Best students are those who surprise their teachers with learning, discipline, and character. Dr. Singh surprised both his academic as well as spiritual teachers and preceptors. The symposium is an inspiration from the teacher of Dr. T.D. Singh, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, to Sri Jitendra. Therefore, this symposium itself is a living example of mysticism, which is a meeting point of science and spirituality. Best teachers are those who teach their students with their personal example, with compassion and love. Dr. Singh was such a wonderful teacher that his students miss him very much even after 15 years of his physical disappearance. Dr. Singh is a gift to this troubled world and to all of us. We are truly blessed in this evening to spend time contemplating on his exemplary, inspiring, and compassionate personality, scientist, and saint. We would like to welcome you all to this symposium. We would especially like to welcome the keynote speaker, Padma Bhushan Dr. Vijay P. Bhatkar, the Chancellor of the Nalanda University, and the speakers of the 3 panel sessions. In the first panel, the need for a synthesis of science and spirituality for the future of science and humanity, Dr. Singh's contribution. In this panel, we would like to welcome Professor Chandra Vikramasinghe, Honorary Professor from University of Buckingham, Professor P.V. Sharma, Vice Chancellor, Amity University, Dr. Hector Rosario, Professor, University of Florida, Dr. Ayush Goel, Assistant Professor at Texas A&M University. And for the second panel, we would like to welcome the second panel, Science and Interfaith Dialogue for the World Peace, Dr. Singh's contribution. We would like to welcome Reverend Charles P. Gibbs, Founding Executive Director, United Religions Initiative, Dr. Fu Chek Wu, Adjunct Associate Professor, National University of Singapore, Dr. Amir Farid Ishaq, former Global Council member, United Religions Initiative, Dr. Rodney Sebastian, Assistant Professor, Manhattan College. For the third panel session, we would like to welcome Dr. Amit Goswami, retired Professor, University of Oregon, Dr. A.K. Mukhopadhyay, former Professor, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Professor Matthew Chandran Kunel, Director, Ecumenical Christian Center, Professor Ram Gopal Uppaluri, Professor, IIT Guwahati. I would like to thank you again for your august presence, and I would like to welcome you all to this wonderful evening, which we look forward to hear from all our wonderful speakers and interaction from the participants. Thank you all for joining and welcome. Namaste.
Thank you, Shri Kesavasdev Raoji, for a nice welcome address and giving us a glimpse of today's session and Dr. T.D. Singh's life. Next up, we have a video tribute to Dr. T.D. Singh with words of appreciation from Nobel Laureates, renowned scholars, and eminent leaders whom he met and had impact on their lives. Thank you. These were very nice words of appreciation from all of them for Dr. T.D. Singh. And thank you for compiling all of this together. Moving ahead in the symposium, now we have a presentation by Sri Varun Agarwal, Director, Bhaktivedanta Institute, on life and works of Dr. T.D. Singh. So I would like to invite Sri Varun Agarwal, Director, Bhaktivedanta Institute, with his presentation on life and works of Dr. T.D. Singh. Yes, the screen is visible.
Yeah, the screen is visible. You can hear me well? Okay. So should I start?
Yes, we can start now.
Okay, this will be a short introduction to Dr. T.D. Singh, his life and works. Title is A Man of Synthesis. So we'll traverse today Dr. Singh's life, how his life has been a synthesis in various aspects. I'll go through, slowly we'll share. Well, of course, to start with, this is Dr. Singh walking with our Professor Penrose, who recently got a Nobel Prize in Physics, one of the world-renowned scholar, physicist, mathematical physicist. He had a very brilliant dialogue with Penrose on many aspects related to consciousness. So, before we go further, this is here we have a new website, drtdsingh.org. So we have just launched. It contains a lot of information about his works, about his life. So those who are interested, they can get a lot. Actively more and more added. So this is Dr. Singh's word. I am doing chemistry of cultures. So this is our path today. Synthesis of chemicals, synthesis of science and spirituality, synthesis of religions. Means so in his aspects from education to his further synthesis of science spirituality to further synthesis of religions, and then we conclude. To begin with, synthesis of chemicals. So Dr. Singh actually is a PhD. He was in physical organic chemistry from University of California, UC Irvine. So he was expert in synthesis of chemicals. In his lab, he was sharing once that how with his hand he was very expert. Not everybody can
Sir,
sometimes
please
it just
continue. Yes, please continue.
okay. Sometimes it gets bounced back. Okay. So Dr. Singh, he was explaining that how he was expert in the chemist has to handle chemicals in the laboratory. So not everybody hand is like this. Like Phillips, when he was discussing with Phillips, that Nobel Laureate in Maryland, physics man. So he was explaining that, well, Phillips was telling, I'm good in hand things, experiment, but I'm not good in theoretical things. So Dr. Singh was really good in synthesis of chemicals, means during his academic studies, during his PhD. Later he did postdoc there in other university, same in the California area. So that was the beginning. And then he went into synthesis of science and spirituality. He met his spiritual perceptor there in Los Angeles, in America itself. And he catalyzed his thoughts that like, you are good in this direction. Why don't you go ahead further and synthesize science and spirituality? He said that is the need of the hour of the world today. The spiritual conceptions and the scientific know-how. If you can do this great work, it will be a big help to humanity. So Dr. Singh took his words very seriously when he created the institution, his organization today. So he worked in many fronts: publications, conferences, dialogues. Okay, sometime it goes back. Okay, sometime is in between. Suddenly, for a few seconds, it sounds back to me. So conferences, dialogues, lectures, research. I'll give you a short glimpse into various areas. What are things he was doing? So before that, there's a glimpse of his, a short glimpse of his activities. Over 50 in-depth publications, over 500 lectures in almost every country of the world, international conferences in San Francisco, in Italy, in heart of the, the Rome there, and the Mumbai, Calcutta, and then 200 national seminars. Actually, the list, we did not make even a full list. So much seminars he organized in various parts of the world. And the interaction with the Nobel Laureates, mostly in science and some with the peace. Like Dalai Lama was also his close connection with him, very close associate. And then other, Betty Williams, and a couple of them. And then science, of course, many. And then, of course, like our previous, our Vasudev, he was telling, he was a singer, writer, all-rounder, not a ordinary, for one personality. So some of these books are there, which you can see today. They are there in the store, online stores, in Amazon, in Apple, and every few days somebody tries to get some book. So these lectures, yeah, he lectures around. This is one of the lectures, a very interesting lecture. It was so packed that there was no, people were outside standing. This is one of the university in Eastern India, in Utkal University, this photograph. But he lectured, he didn't leave. He went to Iceland, he went to, South Africa, he went to Brazil, any college, university, he'll try to present, give a lecture. Science and spirituality. So I give you a small example of a glimpse. So what happened? Okay, yeah, fine. So this is a short. I will give a short example of his genius. So this is a Newton. This we have studied from childhood, at least from very early age, right? That the Newton question that why this apple falling downwards. So what happened that Dr. Singh, he questioned actually 1970s, very early 70s, that well, this is an important question, and we today have a whole gravitation and so much other coming out from that single question. So he said, what about the another question, that why at all there is apple in this cosmos? Or in other words, why at all there is a law of gravitation? Because we discover it. We have not made the law. Law was there before Newton too. So how come there's a law there? So that means there's something behind. Who planned this for all of us? And then, so he actually penned a small paper as an offering to his. He offered this in honor of his perceptor, a very small paper in 70s, early 70s. He questioned this and it was very amazing that he started pointing out very deep foundational things. I'll share you more examples, one of couple of them, and then of course one can go further apple, beauty, the symmetry. Symmetry is a big issue, or a big confusion, or at least in particular physics. So how come there is symmetry? Symmetry is coming in the universe. What about the beauty? So all those questions, deeper aspects. So about science is which prime focus, Dr. Singh focus in life is what the famous monograph, small monograph. Swarinder gave. So that question, what is life? He mentioned and he wrote and he explained that it is not possible to explain without the synthesis of science and spirituality. And that way, by a single question, actually, he led the way for synthesis of science spirituality forever. Because this question can never be answered without bringing in both, not from one discipline. And then, of course, then he focused on some of the most fundamental questions, like what is consciousness? Well, what is quantum collapse, if that really happens? What is Gödel's incomplete theorem? Where do new ideas come from? How life originated? And what about the life's most innate qualities like compassion, forgiveness? So if one goes in the foundations of this question, for deep into this, basically foundations of science, which Dr. Singh questioned and called, one will go for synthesis of science and spirituality. And that was a epitome. So not only synthesis, and there's some supreme or God or supreme intelligence behind the universe, he also tried to conclude that, well, not only the supreme, is also very personal and very loving. And he had a beautiful dialogue with these two physics giants, actually, one from California, one from Maryland. Both are lasers men. So, and they very clearly explained that, well, Einstein God was not very personal, but for us, we are sure that we need a personal God, means very loving and personal person. This is a dialogue, a photograph with the Towns. He recently left. He was very active and very close friend of Dr. Singh. Dr. actually invited Dr. Singh for his 90th birthday in California, and so many Nobel Laureates. And Dr. Singh, he said he was amazed. They're very happy that so much he invited him in amidst all of them. And similarly, synthesis of religions. Well, he was very active. He was one of the founding person of this a body called United Religions Initiative. The body is based in San Francisco. It has chapters all over the world. Every country it has, in India, in very different countries of Europe. Very big body, and they're very good. They have chapters. They have circles, very nicely organized. So, of course, there's a Father Mizi. He was very close to many of the interfaith dialogues from Assisi, and of course, Parliament of World Religions, United Nations. He was deeply involved. So, synthesis of religions, synthesis of science, spirituality, synthesis of minds, synthesis of cultures. So, this his whole life was synthesis, synthesizing, bringing together seemingly opposite elements. So to conclude, well, how this was possible, the synthesis. And generally, in our most of our conception or work, we try to take one side, and sometimes we become very strong in one side or one mind, one side of them. But then, how this was possible to bring so seemingly opposite elements in different aspects of life, different walks of life. So that because of his the heart, as a person. So it is said that he took this is a this personality, because when the person is very broad-minded, and also his heart is in a differently trained, then he can go beyond a specific domain and then see, and then he can able to harmonize. So this synthesis is a great lesson which we learned, see, heard from his life, from his books, from his works, from his institution, and even today the works are continuing. Synthesis of science, spirituality, synthesis of various aspects of life. So with these few words, a short introduction. I'm sure there are a lot of things going to come now. Our scholars, our people, renowned people, all the distinguished people now, they will be sharing a lot of good thoughts. So we look forward to hear all of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sri Varun Agarwalji. I'm sure there would have been a big applause if it was live. But I would like to remind our participants that you can use the reaction feature to show your appreciation in the Zoom. And indeed, such a wonderful presentation with beautiful examples. Thank you so much. So upcoming is a very interesting lecture by Dr. T.D. Singh himself. This was recorded in 2004. It was a welcome address delivered at Rome Conference on Origin of Life, held at Vatican City in 2004. So let's go through this video lecture by Dr. T.D. Singh.
I'll open with a short prayer. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namo Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avasisate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Respected spiritual leaders, honorable dignitaries, distinguished delegates, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Bhaktivedanta Institute's 3-day International Congress on Life and its Origin, Exploration from Science and Religious Spiritual Traditions here in Rome, the very meaningful and historic city. Rome is a very historic city, and it has played a major role in the Western world for well over 2,000 years. Rome is important because the Vatican City is the headquarters of the Roman Catholic world, and the Pope resides here. The Honorable Mayor of Rome, Mr. Walter Beltroni, has kindly arranged for this hall to be used for this Congress without any charge. This shows the living interest that Rome has in both fields of science and spirituality. We are extremely grateful to him for his kind support and for giving us this facility. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to the Honorable President of the Italian Republic, His Excellency Carlo Giulio Ciampi, for his conveying to us his personal best wishes for the success of this Congress, and also for sending his best well-wishing words. We also acknowledge the kind patronage of the Municipality of Rome, of the President of the Regional Council of Lazio, and of the aldermanship to the cultural politics of the Municipality of Rome. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and UNESCO have also sent us messages conveying their best wishes for the success of this Congress. The organizers are all grateful to all of them for their kind support. The Bhaktivedanta Institute feels very much encouraged by all these positive signs of support from these leaders. This seems to be an indication, a confirmation that currently there is a paradigm shift in progress in the global mindset. This makes now the perfect time for this type of a Congress to be held. For too long, it seems that science and the religion, or science and the spirituality per se, have been in opposition, like enemies. However, the ultimate goal of both is the search for the truth for the welfare of humanity. Therefore, they should join hands for the benefit of the world. Recent high-tech terrorism seems to have shocked the entire world by the gross misuse of science and the religion combined. Would have ever thought of using a high-tech passenger jet liner full of civilians as a guided missile? People all over the world today live in fear and anxiety from terrorism. A major cause for many avoidable activities could be due to a lack of the deeper knowledge and understanding of life. Most of us will agree that knowledge of life is the most important. Many of us dream for a better world with lasting peace and happiness, and many congresses have been held in an attempt to understand life. However, most scientific congresses that have touched upon life in its origin have strictly focused on the material aspect of only. However, every serious scientist and a thoughtful scholar will agree with the fact that the scientific discussion based primarily on atoms and molecules in regard to life's origin is extremely limited. Nobel Laureate, the Hungarian Nobel Laureate and the biochemist Singh remarked, quote, "In my search for the secret of life, I ended up with atoms and electrons, which have no life at all. Somewhere along the line, life has run out through my fingers," unquote. There is enough evidence that life as such is not made up of only molecules, but there are deeper aspects which we can describe in general as being spiritual aspects of life. Everyone will agree that life as we know it is made up of, number one, the physical body, and number two, the mind, and the number three, the conscious entity which animates the first two and experiences the world around him through this mind and the five senses of the body. This conscious being or self is characterized by having undeniable spiritual qualities and properties such as free will, experience of pleasure and pain, joy and suffering, possesses consciousness or the ability to experience knowledge and to respond to it, and the various emotional and aesthetic feelings. All these properties are really an integral part of life, but they are beyond the scope of materialistic science of mere atoms and molecules. A special feature of this Congress is that we will see science and spirituality going hand in hand in the search for the understanding of life and its different aspects, including its origin from both the rigorous scientific and the spiritual domains of reality. As we move on in the 21st century, the time has definitely come to re-examine more thoroughly about the science of life, its purpose, and its origin. In this regard, the ancient religious and spiritual scriptures of the world have contributed this point that everything in this material world, including life, is a product of divine creation. In other words, God is the source of everything. Aham Sarvasya Prabhava, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita. This Congress is primarily aimed at introducing a serious discussion about the role of God in the scientific research of life, its nature and its origin. Many scholars today express that we need a new science or new paradigm to understand the deeper meaning of reality. In this connection, I would like to suggest that spirituality will be a major partner of this new science or of this new paradigm. This new science should be a holistic approach in the search of life. It should be objective and balanced. A one-sided approach will not be able to answer many questions in this vital field of knowledge. Both science and spirituality must be complementary to one another. Many prominent thinkers in science, as well as the religious leaders from around the world, have gathered here for a very productive discussion in regard to life's origin. This Congress is probably the first or one of the first ever as humble attempt to begin a new chapter in the history of the evolution of modern science. It seems that of late, the intelligentsia of the world have become more willing to openly discuss spirituality. This is greatly a welcome development. Back when I was doing my PhD in the United States, in the early 70s, generally most scientists would mock at and dismiss any religious idea as it was considered somewhat unfashionable for a scientist to entertain such thoughts. It seems that science has reached too many dead ends in the search for life's origin, and now they are ready to consider that there may be another nature operating behind the scenes, behind the backdrop of what we can see. The deliberations of the distinguished scholars over the next 3 days will be extremely useful in this millennium for the search of the ultimate knowledge of life.
So this was a very impactful message from Dr. T.D. Singh to all of us and his own way of deliverance, very insightful and inspiring. So now we are into the symposium with a great mood and intent. So I believe it's high time that I would like to welcome our chief guest of the symposium, Padma Bhushan Dr. Vijay P. Bhatkar, Chancellor, Nalanda University. We're extremely delighted to have you here, sir, among with us today. To give a short introduction of Dr. Bhatkar, Dr. Bhatkar is an Indian computer scientist, IT leader, and educationalist. Among many other things, he is best known as the architect of India's national initiative in supercomputing, where he led the development of Param supercomputers. He is a recipient of prestigious awards like Padma Bhushan, Padma Shri, Maharashtra Bhushan, and many more. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Bhatkar for his keynote address as the chief guest of the symposium. Dr. Bhatkar, please.
Thank you indeed for inviting me for such a momentous occasion, such an important occasion. Today we are celebrating the 84th birth anniversary of a remarkable man whose several facets have been enunciated before us. Listening to those facets, are they able to hear? Okay. I was reminded of what Einstein said. Such a spectrum of possibilities, what humans can accomplish, was brought before us. What a multidimensional, what a polymath or multidimensional personality Dr. T.D. Singh was indeed. And we are trying to unravel his personality with various facets, the life and works, through this symposium. it is always, I think, what we remember. We are for a finite time on this planet, but when we are gone, actually, in spiritual tradition, we never go. We only reincarnate in different forms. So when I look at Dr. T.D. Singh, I'm reminded of Einstein's statement that what is the purpose of life? And he was not a believer in that sense. He didn't believe in God. But Einstein said, a very famous, very highly often quoted statement from Einstein was, I'm not interested in this and that and that. I'm interested in what's in God's mind. Coming from him, that became a signature statement coming from Einstein. And that was his life indeed. That was the signature of his life. And he really unfolded about what is the purpose of life, what's in the mind of God. And today we are, I think, bringing out that facet from a great scientist who didn't believe in God himself. So he asked the question, what I'm interested is, what is in the mind of God himself. Today, when we look at, I think, one signature of Dr. T.D. Singh, we are remembering him, we're commemorating him today on his 84th birthday. That what is one sentence? In one sentence, you have to describe Dr. T.D. Singh's life and works and life. That is this grand synthesis of science and spirituality. Science and, in that other sense, religion. No one, I think, not among the scientists, of course, but no one, even the spiritualists or the religious people, brought to the fore this very question. Can science and religion, or science and spirituality, that is different from religion, but can they be brought together? As has been told to us this while introducing the life, Dr. T.D. Singh, Bhaktisvarupa Damodar Swami, and once again and again it's told to us that singular contribution has been, if one person has been, I think, has contributed to bringing this to seemingly, what you call, not converging disciplines together, was Dr. T.D. Singh. And that has been his singular contribution, as we see. Not only has brought them together, but he brought a large body of people who did not believe in this synthesis, who did not agree, seemingly agree with this synthesis. He brought them on one platform. And not anyone, but very distinguished people. And what by distinguished we mean people like the most, I think, the honored and celebrated people as Nobel Laureates in different fields of science, human religion, for peace, on one platform. That has been his great contribution. In a way, he was foreseeing the coming of the future, which scientists had not seen. Even the spiritual people had not seen that they will come together like this, and they should be brought together. If they are not converging, they will converge, and they should converge together. And that has been the, I think, and that has been the singular attainment of his life. I think that one thing which the dimension Varun ji was introducing to us was that dimension is that I think this is possible because, not because of intellectual power, but I think the power of love. That is, I think, missing out in our dialogue. Power of love. And that was very vividly brought to us while introducing this one, and which we must reflect on that. Be scientists or we spiritualists or this kind of thing, though this power of love is extremely important if this convergence has to be brought about. Without that, I think there can be intellectual discussions, there can be arguments, there can be logical arguments and logical fallacies we can bring to the table, but not without love, we can really understand each other. So I like this, I think this introduction of Dr. T.D. Singh. This also comes from a different aspect, the love for God, the love for the world itself, the people across. So that's why he's able to talk to people of, I think, from different backgrounds, and combined with, I think, that thing in terms of prayers, in terms of music, in terms of surrender. I think that is why I feel that this conversation has been possible because of that. And this is a very important today when we are celebrating the life, the very important dimension we must, I surrender to. I think this is a great role model for me in that sense that, yes, we can discuss intellectually the synthesis of science and spirituality. I remember when I'm working in supercomputing, in CDAC, in different dimensions of mathematics and all that thing, this thought came to me that I would like to create a university. I would like to found a university or discover a university where we will teach science and spirituality in single breath and to understand the nature of reality. There are many papers in these commemorative volumes which have been brought before us, that how to bring this together. And I said that university should be called something like in a new paradigm, which I think what Dr. T.D. Singh, I think respected T.D. Singh, he always brought together that a new paradigm has to be discovered in understand the nature of reality. The current paradigm, whether science or even spirituality or other, is not complete. It tells only the half story. And if at all, I think this issue was brought together, why there is so much of violence in spite of so much of knowledge, so many great universities across the world. I think we respect so many professors, so many thinkers, thought leaders. Why there is such a conflict? Conflict is not only in terms of war or in political level, but that conflict is within us itself. So why? And this cannot vanish unless a new paradigm is discovered. And that paradigm has to be, I think, bringing the dimension of love, Bhakti, Vedanta. I like that thing that when Prabhupada named this institution, the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So the other day, we were launching Bhaktivedanta Institute in city of Pune, not launching, but looking at its academic program or research program. And the issue came that calling it Bhakti, and Bhakti means a supreme love towards God. I think ultimate love towards God, and that love dimension, as well as Vedanta, the ultimate knowledge, bringing them together on one platform. So this Bhaktivedanta Institute, who was the founder director, I think, Dr. T.D. Singh, is a very important contribution to both Bhakti and Vedanta, for not saying. And I think this dimension also need to be appreciated, particularly when we are talking about new policy of education. I think we are talking about the national education policy we have just arrived. We are trying to see how it can be implemented. But that dimension is that are we spreading the dimension of love in our education? And it doesn't happen to be. You see the campuses, you look at the people, how they compete, how they want to do these kind of things. That love dimension is missing. And without that love, the reality cannot be understood. I think I would say. So this is one major contribution, and that's why we see that T.D. Singh ji, the great man we are celebrating today, that he had all these dimensions in one. He was so many personalities or so many dimensions of human life together in the class. He was a scientist, he was a spiritualist, he was a singer, he was a musician, he loved children, he was interested in education. So many dimensions in one person is only possible, I think, by studying the life of Dr. T.D. Singh, and we are celebrating him today. Another thing which I wanted to bring that to understand, is it possible? We don't see it. Is it possible? I think Dr. T.D. Singh is our hero, my hero in that context. Is it possible? Yes. Here is one person who has done this, who has cared for it, who has celebrated. And another thing is that I think his achievement, it is because of this dimension, he was able to bring so many diverse personalities in different disciplines on one platform. I think because of his sincerity and because of his love for people, I think to understand this and to bring about this multidimensional synthesis, as was told to us. When he brought the synthesis across many things, religion and science and many other dimensions, what has been told to us. So such a personality, such a person, I think for me, he's a great hero. I would like to say that if the life has to be lived like this, if meaningful, as well as loving, as well as caring, and as well as joyful life to be brought together, it is Dr. T.D. Singh. For our scientists like us, or for philosophers, he is a hero. He will remain as a hero. And such a life can be actually lived. And we can take this on. And so on this occasion, thank you for inviting me to this. It is one of my, I think, the most joyful moment, because I'm understanding the various facets of Dr. T.D. Singh, reflecting on him. I think we are surrendering him. I think, and this life, I think, will be well lived, and it will consider all young people here. I think this is the life to be, I feel, is to be celebrated, to be commemorated, to be loved, to be emulated. I think I'm very, very happy about it. And today is very, very special day. I think 84. The 84 is a good spiritual number. We are celebrating this great soul who came, and I think who brought true knowledge. Without this, see, in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, when we come to the Jnana Vijnana Yoga, I think we are talking about science and spirituality together. And God, Lord himself, Krishna himself says that I want to show you that it's both science as well as spirituality. Without which, I think, and that's why I'm giving you full knowledge. Learning that, nothing remains to be known. Today's education, today's, I think, what policies we are talking about, we are not yet there, because this has to be experienced. Spirituality or spiritual knowledge is the experiential knowledge. It has actually experienced, not intellectually argued alone. I think it has been so. So we are bringing this together. We are giving a, I think, understanding to understand Jnana Vijnana Yoga. In that sense, Lord Krishna's Jnana Vijnana Yoga together, and which has not been brought in this entire dimension, policies so far. Therefore, Bhaktivedanta Institute has a special role to play. I feel Bhakti and Vedanta kind of thing together has a special role to play in dimension of our education itself and shaping our life and personalities and purpose of life. So once again, thank you for inviting me for this. It is such a great, I think, honor for me to see my hero being celebrated, our hero, all of us kind of thing being celebrated, his life being celebrated. And by celebrating him, we are trying to discover ourselves. Thank you so much. And let this symposia, 3 symposia, which are organized, some great people have converged together and talk about this one. And that will show us the light of the future, for the future of humanity. When I call that university, synthesis of science and spirituality for the ascent of humanity, in all dimensions. And we require that new paradigm for our education and for our life itself, not only for us, but across the world, across humanity. Thank you so much. And once again, I honor you. They have got wonderful new introductions to Dr. T.D. Singh. I offer my prayers and I end my talk here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhatkar. This was indeed a very beautiful and heartfelt message. And I'm sure this reached to all of us, the gravity of your message. And thank you for sharing your vision with us. And we're also very much indebted to you for your love and support towards Bhaktivedanta Institute. And thank you for being present with us today here. So in that note, now next up is the first cultural performance of the evening today. And this is a very special one. And this is special because this features Dr. T.D. Singh in this. So before we go into this, I would like to make an announcement and a request that after this performance, we'll have a group picture. So I would like to request all of us to be present and kindly switch on their video after this performance, where we'll take some screenshots. And yes, so this is a very rare vintage footage of Ranganiketan Manipuri cultural arts performances featuring Dr. T.D. Singh in his different avatar in which we have heard now as a musician, as an artist, and I hope all of us will enjoy it now. So yes, let's.
Ranganiketan Center for Arts and Culture was founded in Imphal, Manipur, in order to promote the classical Indian culture in the form of performing arts, with a special focus on Manipuri dance, Nata Sankirtana, martial arts, and the tribal dances of northeastern India. In most cases, the culture of Manipur remains unexposed to the outside world. So one of the goals of Ranganiketan is to expose this Manipuri culture throughout the world. The present artists of Ranganiketan Manipuri dance and martial arts troupe are some of the finest and the most accomplished artists of Manipur. Most of them have performed both at home and abroad, winning great acclaim and medals of honor. The primary aim of this troupe is to promote universal peace and the brotherhood among all people through the language of art and culture.
This millennium is called the age of quarrel and war. I call sometimes the age of science and technology. In Sanskrit it's called Kali Yuga. So Kali Yuga is not very easy for all of us. So, but the Lord is so merciful that He always arranges in such a way that those who are very sincere can overcome all these problems in this material life. So therefore, this Sankirtan is actually the process by which one can get the ultimate goal of life and also overcome all the problems of this material world. And Gauranga Mahaprabhu has inaugurated this Sankirtan movement. And so, in Manipur, this is called Hong and this is Sankirtan is a part and parcel of our regular life. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu
So I hope all of us, we enjoyed this performance a lot, and I'd like to thank the team for making arrangement of this footage. So now we'll have a group picture. So I would like to request all of us to kindly switch on the video, and few of our volunteers will take screenshot. And yes, so yes, maybe we can take a few seconds to switch on. Yeah. So meanwhile, screenshots. Yes. Maybe I can also say 3, 2, 1. Yes. So there are still people who are switching on videos.
Smile, please.
Yes. So make sure that we get everyone. Yes. So you can try adjusting angles, and we'll take a best picture and put it in maybe website, or we'll preserve it. Thank you. Yes. So I think that would be sufficient, and thank you all. Thank you so much. We'll proceed with our events now, and just give me a second. Yes. So next up we have, now we begin with the panel discussion. So I'll quickly share my screen, and then yes. So we'll have the first panel session of the evening today. And the theme of this panel session is the need for a synthesis of science and spirituality for the future of science and humanity. And mostly the Dr. T.D. Singh's contributions in this theme we'll be talking about. So in this panel, we have scientists from all over the world. We have Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe, Honorary Professor, University of Buckingham. We have Professor P.V. Sarma, Vice Chancellor, Amity University, Dr. Hector Rosario, Courtesy Professor, University of Florida, Dr. Ayush Goel, Assistant Professor, Texas A&M University. And this session will be moderated by Siddharth Tiwari, Assistant Professor, Indira Gandhi Institute of Technology, Odisha. So now I would hand over the chair to Siddharth Tiwari.
Thank you so much, Dipankar, for this wonderful opportunity to me. In this screen, I could see Professor P.B. Sharma, and from Amity University, and Professor Ayush Goel from Texas A&M University, and Dr. Hector Rosario from University of Florida, and Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe from University of Buckingham. So I welcome all of you. So just a quick overview of how this session will be conducted. I will call upon each speaker to make his presentation for 5 minutes. After all the panelists have presented, we will then have a discussion on the topic. So so I would first request to Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe to start this session. Sir, you are not audible. Maybe your mic is mute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This is a great honor to celebrate such an important event, and an event that celebrates the life of a great hero of mine, Dr. T.D. Singh. And I'm delighted to pay my own tribute to this great person and to his lifelong mission, which, as I see it, was to bridge the gap between spirituality, between Eastern philosophy and modern reductionist science. And that's an activity that I think is long overdue. We tend to separate the Eastern traditions, the traditions of the Vedas and so on, from Western science. And we all know, of course, but we rarely admit that modern Western science that we've all grown up with and we've been educated in is an imperial Western culture. It's part of the old British Empire. And so culture and the moderns and the science that we are taught in schools and so on are inextricably interwoven. So what Dr. Singh sought to do was to disconnect these ancient obsolete links between European culture and science as we are taught, and to connect Eurocentric concepts of science, the main concepts of science that we accept with key ideas that have a much greater antiquity. And that, of course, includes spirituality. Particularly the ideas that have their origins in the ancient Indian traditions, and particularly also in the Vedas. We all know, that, of course, that India has contributed enormously to many aspects of Western science. The Indian origins of our number system, the concept of zero, and in fact, concepts of both zero and infinity are distinctly yours, distinctly Indian. And these are less known facts in the modern reckoning of education and so on in the West. Even less well known are facts that relate, for instance, to certain aspects of modern physics, like atomism and the universality of life in the universe. And these all belong to you, belong to India, and have Indian roots. To me personally, spirituality is essentially synonymous with our deep and inextricable connection with the universe, which in fact is the source of our conscious being, our essential component as our existence as sentient creatures. In Western science, consciousness, the idea of consciousness is still very, very poorly defined. I grew up in sort of Buddhist background, in Buddhist traditions in Sri Lanka. And in Buddhism, I was taught that Buddhism, of course, is derived from much older traditions of India, Vedic traditions and so on. I was told that every newborn human is a synthesis of three components: the egg from the mother, the sperm from the father, and most importantly, a packet of consciousness that is derived from the universe. This consciousness in each and every one of us is essentially, and I'd say it as an infinitesimal fragment of a vast, almost infinite cosmic intelligence, a cosmic spirituality. And this is what Western science and Western scientists and Western culture has very great difficulty in accepting. I think that from my own research, evidence for life, and I'm sorry to bring my own research, but I think it is relevant to the ideas of Dr. T.D. Singh and to the topics that we're discussing today. From my own research over 40 years on the nature of life in the universe, evidence for life as a cosmic phenomenon is just overwhelming. It has grown to a point that to deny it is tantamount to committing a crime against science, a crime against humanity even. Strident denials continue of this idea of life being cosmic for the reason that Earth-centered life and human-centered intelligence forms the hardcore of Western culture and Western science, and it has remained the hardcore of Western science, Western philosophy from the time of Aristotle. Dr. Singh is amongst the few heroes, few heroes, who stress that science in these most fundamental areas, such as consciousness, spirituality, cosmic life, needs most urgently to be what I would like to call decolonized, right? To separate the colonial aspects and colonial history that essentially clouds our thinking as Western trained scientists.
Sir, may I kindly excuse? It is 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
okay,
please.
I'm almost finished. If this does not happen, if you do not regard the consciousness and life as cosmic phenomenon and cosmic life as being universal, I think the future for humanity is very bleak. Our children and our grandchildren will inherit a world in which hatreds abound, destructive wars are the norm, and the great bulk of the world's surviving population will live in poverty and despair. The idea that such a universal consciousness is the font of all knowledge, with its implications of the interconnectedness of the very many attributes of the universe, combined with an abiding respect for all life on our planet, can be regarded as a central tenet of Dr. Singh's philosophy. The very survival of our social institutions, survival of humanity itself, may well be contingent upon the adoption of such a worldview that was so passionately expounded by Dr. T.D. Singh throughout his life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Vikram Singh. Now, I'm sorry for disturbing because time is less, and we really want to hear you more and more. Now, I would like to invite Professor P.B. Sharma to please for your presentation.
What a privilege it is to be part of this great panel and to pay our deep respect to the scientist and the spiritual hero, as has been said, and to my guru, Dr. T.D. Singh ji, on his 84th birthday celebrations. Having said this, let me also say that Dr. T.D. Singh ji has initiated a cause which is so important today to discover, in fact, that value and worth of synthesis of science and spirituality. I must ask a question to the audience today, and that is in respect of whether science alone can deliver the promise of the world in which we want to live, we wish to live, and our coming generations wish to live. And this, I ask this question in the backdrop of the most recent development in science, which are asking us to move along the pathways of robotics, humanoids, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and so on. I ask you another question. Can spirituality alone can create the world in which we wish to live in harmony and peace of the kind which we so desire? In my opinion, the answer to both the question perhaps is no. Science alone cannot deliver the promise of solving the current or future problem, let alone lead us to a blissful and meaningful, peaceful coexistence on planet Mother Earth. On the other hand, if spirituality alone pursues its course in isolation, devoid of the scientific temper of the kind which we all understand, then spirituality also will end up by describing, in fact, the science as avidya. This is how it has been described by the religious leaders in the past. And that is why the two fell apart. Dr. T.D. Singh tried to build this great bridge between science and spirituality because he understood that it is not just the physical power of science that is what we require. We need a spiritual power of science to sensitize science to the needs to serve the purpose and meaning of life. On the other hand, he was also very conscious that spirituality is not merely a game of thoughts or game of consciousness. It needs to also be translated into real actions so as to create this meaningful, blissful, peaceful coexistence on planet Mother Earth. And that is why the synthesis of two together, in my opinion, is the answer to creating the world of our dream. In fact, now the time is most opportune because we have understood after the COVID-19 that no amount of scientific explorations merely of the kind which we have pursued for the last 200 years can really give us the power to overcome the power of the microbial kingdom, which I have called the power of God Almighty. And therefore, I think it is the right time to provide the turning point to the modern science with its synthesis, with its spirituality, to create what Madame Curie way back in 1938 has called the spiritual strength of science. It is this spiritual strength of science can be created and cultivated and nurtured only by a profound synthesis of science and spirituality. And therefore, Dr. T.D. Singh was absolutely right that after finishing his PhD, he threw himself into the arena and sensitized the high and mighty Nobel Laureates and great many scientists around the world, as well as spiritualists. Let me finish by saying that synthesis of religion has been tried for several years. Each religion tried to assert its superiority, and that synthesis could never be obtained. Synthesis of cultures is another most difficult aspect. But synthesis of science and spirituality is something which is achievable, and we all must work towards it. Thank you to you, Bhaktivedanta Institute, for taking the torchlight of this great mission from our spiritual leader, Dr. T.D. Singh ji, and work towards creating a greater community of scientists and spiritualists together around the world in all nations to answer this great question of creating the blissful, peaceful world in which we all wish to live to. And the synthesis of science and tech and spirituality, in my opinion, holds a great promise to deliver that world for all of us. I wish to thank you for this opportunity given to me, and I pay my deepest respect to Dr. T.D. Singh ji, who was very kind and gracious to bless a person like me during my days at Delhi College of Engineering and Delhi Technological University. I pay my deepest respect to the lotus feet of the Guru, Dr. T.D. Singh ji. Let His Holiness bless all of us today when we are remembering him and his divine grace. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Professor Sharma. And now I would like to call Dr. Hector Rosario to share his views.
Good evening, everyone. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for always thinking of me for these types of events. I am honored to have been called to say a few words about that great personality of Dr. T.D. Singh, Bhaktisvarupa Damodar Maharaj. I'm honored also to be in this panel with these distinguished personalities. And as I was listening to both Mr. Vasudeva Rao at the beginning and now Professor T.B. Sharma, there are two things that I wanted to highlight. And the first one is that I think that the most important quality that a person should have, especially when dealing with issues of synthesis of science and religion and spirituality and religion, is humility. And Dr. T.D. Singh exemplified that. Sometimes we misunderstand that being humble means something that it is not, or not being assertive enough, or not being intelligent enough, or not being, but the humility that he exhibited, being knowledgeable, being wise, being kind and generous with his own knowledge. I think that's what allowed so many highly respected intellectuals to engage in conversations with him. And sometimes I see those qualities lacking in other people, either scientists or spiritualists, who want to engage in this type of service. If because the issue is, if I want to engage someone, then and I come off as arrogant if I pretend that I know, not that I know everything, but that what I know is so solid that it has no room for mistake, then that does not allow for a productive exchange of ideas with others. Sometimes I see colleagues and friends saying, whether, okay, I've this in this paper I explain, and I've seen several like that, a synthesis of science and spirituality or whatever it might be, or I have explained a unified theory of physics or of everything. I've seen people, I've interacted with people like that. And then I'm receptive to what they say. And then when I try to read or to understand those ideas, what I see is a dogmatic approach. And a dogmatic approach will never help us build that mutual understanding that we need in order for us to exchange ideas and work together. And then, so this connects to what Professor P.B. Sharma was saying about that synthesis of cultures. This idea of synthesis of cultures requires that we focus on what we have in common and not in what we differ. If we focus on our differences, we shall never find any, we will not make much progress. And the issue is, if we think about it as a mathematical system, as a logical system, there are some axioms, there are some premises that we hold true. And based on those axioms, the conclusions that we reach might be different, simply based on the fact that our axioms are different. We might be logical.
Dr. Rosario, excuse
yes.
me, it's 5 minutes and we can discuss in later also in panel discussion. Your time is over.
Yeah, so let us finish here now. It's okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Rosario, and I would now like to invite Dr. Ayush Goyal to share his views. Dr. Ayush Goyal, yeah. Sir, you are mute. Please unmute yourself. You are still mute, sir. Yeah. Dr. Goyal, you are mute from your side.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
okay,
now we
okay.
can hear. Thank you.
So it was not allowing me to unmute myself. So
okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you to the Bhaktivedanta Institute for organizing this wonderful panel and this wonderful conference honoring the legacy of Professor T.D. Singh. And thank you so much for allowing me to participate and contribute to this panel session. I'm very honored to be in the presence of Professor Chandra Vikram Singh, who I have read some of his literature and some of his contributions to the in the theory of panspermia, and I'm very feel very honored and privileged to be in the presence of Professor Chandra Vikram Singh, and there's a lot for me to learn from his works. And also, I'm very honored and privileged to be in the presence of Professor P.B. Sharma, who is one of my great mentors. So I would like to thank Professor P.B. Sharma for guiding me in some of my important phases of my life. Thank you, Professor P.B. Sharma. And thank you, Dr. Hector Rosario, for gracing us on this occasion. I'm very glad to be in the presence of such eminent scientists. And I would like to share my screen if possible, or if not, I can also just go through my points. Should I share my screen?
Yes, you can share.
Okay. So let me, I've just made a few points which I wanted to cover, and then that will take the 5 minutes of my presentation. Share screen. So it's just a few slides which I would like to discuss. So my name is Dr. Ayush Goyal. I'm an assistant professor at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. And for this few minutes, I have just created some slides. So the questions that I am interested to do research on are science and Bhagavad mutually exclusive. And when I use the term science, I am referring to modern science, the modern science that is taught to us in the university or in the modern world, based on astronomy, based on physics, based on quantum mechanics. And the Bhagavad, when I refer to the Bhagavad, it is referring to the Bhagavad Purana and the Vedas. So are science and the Bhagavad mutually exclusive, or are there parallels that can be drawn between modern science and the Bhagavad? And can they be synthesized? So these types of forums and panels allow us to discuss whether there is some possibility of synthesizing modern science and the Bhagavad, or if they're mutually exclusive. And I would like to cover some key points of discussion. And I have kept only a few points, keeping in mind that we have only 5 minutes for each of our panel members. So one of the research areas I am interested in is AI and consciousness. As I'm an artificial intelligence researcher, so we know neural networks is a very common model in artificial intelligence, and that is based on the human brain. But even in AI, the programmer knows that AI cannot act by itself. It needs to be programmed. And we find a parallel in the Bhagavad. Bhagavad mentions that there is a programmer behind the machine. In the Bhagavad, the word in Sanskrit is Atma for the programmer, or the soul or spirit behind the body, and the technical or the Sanskrit word for the body is Deha. It can also be referred to as Yantra, as referred to by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So we find these parallels between the AI, between the AI research and the Bhagavad. We can learn from these parallels between the two streams of the Bhagavad and modern science. Another area of research that has fascinated me from my beginning of my research into science and synthesis of science and spirituality is I'm very inspired by the works of Professor Dr. Chandra Vikram Singh, and that's why I feel very honored to be in his presence today and to learn from him and hear from him. So the directed panspermia theory by Dr. Chandra Vikram Singh and Dr. Fred Hoyle, where organic molecules were sent to the Earth through asteroids, and there is scientific proof that they found organic molecules in these asteroids, gives more credence to the theory of directed panspermia, which is much more scientifically credible than the Darwinian model of evolution. So the origin of life research is a field in which more of us scientists should give our time to. We should investigate and learn from, take the literature published by scientists such as Professor Chandra Vikram Singh and Dr. Fred Hoyle, and continue this research, or if not continue, present it to other scientists and other students of science. And in the parallel,
Professor Goyal, kindly, your time is over. Could you please discuss this further in panel discussion, if you don't mind?
Yes, summarize, because this is my last slide.
Thank you. Thank you.
So my last point is that the Bhagavad mentions life on earth was manifested by Daksha Prajapati, and this can be considered an extraterrestrial source of the origin of life on earth. So these are some of the points of discussion and how science and Bhagavata can be synthesized. So thank you very much for again inviting me, and I feel very honored to be in the presence of Professor Chandravikram Singh and Professor P.B. Sharma and Dr. Rosario. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now, So it was wonderful hearing to all the panelists for their views. I would now seek your attention on this quotation of Dr. T.D. Singh. So what Dr. T.D. Singh says, that religion and spiritual wisdom can help in framing the moral and ethical codes of science. Thus, science and religion should be complementary and mutually dependent upon each other in all human endeavors. Now, this is very interesting when we talk about the moral and ethical codes of science and its complement and the science and religion playing a role, complementary role. So I would now open this floor for the discussion to this topic and this quotation, and would like to hear your views.
Just quickly, if I could say that the religion and spiritual wisdom surely, yes, can come together. But when it comes to science and religion, the difficulty here is the religion is also comprising of dogmas and traditions and systems of prayers, etc. They all become very different from one religion to another. So I think we should be hitting at the synthesis between science and spirituality and not science and religion. Religion would, of course, once we are able to create the synthesis between science and spirituality, the task of putting science and religion would be far more easier, because by that time, the spiritual strength of science as well as the spiritual power of religion would have begun to work. And then the bridge can be much more effectively created. So my considered opinion is that we must continue to talk about synthesis between science and spirituality, science and spiritual wisdom of all religions, but not enter into the details of the traditions and modes of worship and other things. That otherwise lead to difference. This is what my personal opinion, but I will let me hear what my learned panel says.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the trappings of individual religions really impede our understanding of the essential components that religions are, essential content of religions, which is, as you said, the spiritual content. To me, a spirituality of the type that Dr. T.D. Singh and all of us trying to investigate has to be regarded as a cosmic property, a property of the universe. And we are essentially creatures of that universe. We have taken on little minute sort of atoms of that consciousness, and that is essentially our connection with spirituality, our connection with the universe, of universal love and all that kind of stuff is, I think, much more important than the individual religions that the world has at the moment, which are often in conflict with one another. And this has been a major problem over the last, I don't know, maybe the last century perhaps, religions just fighting in the Middle East and everywhere there's conflict of religious belief systems, because they differ not in the absolute sort of rudimentary component of every religion, which is a spiritual component, but in the trappings. They disagree with the rituals, they disagree with the details of their belief system. So I think I agree with Dr. Sharma, Professor Sharma, that we should separate the spiritual, the cosmic intelligence component of religions with the identification of the religions themselves.
This whole idea of synthesis between various religions was taken up in 1893 at the first Parliament of World Religions, where Swami Vivekananda himself has participated. and we find that this could not make a big headway. But
No.
putting together the spiritual wisdom of all religions through the nexus between science and spirituality, I think it will work wonders. And we must excite the imagination of all religious leaders and religious followers to converge together on that spiritual wisdom. Each religion asks you to be truthful. Each religion asks you to be peaceful. Each religion asks you to be a noble citizen of global world. Why should we not bring together that spiritual wisdom of religion and put it together in science, and then science and spirituality can go together. But I want to hear my other panelists. But thank you so much, Professor Bikram Singh sir, for endorsing the view. Yeah.
So how about Dr. Goyal and Dr. Rosario?
Yes, I would like to add to that even in the field of education now, educationists are realizing there's a need for adding moral and ethical education, even for engineers and even for computer scientists and different fields of study. And the spirituality brings that ethical and moral values. So that is why spiritual education should be inculcated and should be provided in the universities as well. Otherwise, if an engineer or scientist graduates and they do not have those moral or ethical values, then we can have results such as the Holocaust caused in Japan from the atom bomb dropped in the land there. So these types of events, or the events happening in Nazi Germany, these are examples of how science can wreak havoc in the world if there is not ethical and spiritual values behind the use of that science. So definitely there's a need for spirituality to be inculcated and provided as an education to the engineers and scientists of today.
I will only add that, connecting it to what I was saying when I finished my introduction, is that if we could, and this is not an easy task, but if we could find a simple set of axioms, some things that, some commonalities, some things that we can say, look, this is what brings us together. I mean, in Buddhism, you have such simple things as, the fact of being human, the fact that we suffer, the fact that there are some basic things that do bring us together. And we can avoid the trappings of particular belief systems and so on. So if we can focus on those things that brings us together, those things that bring us together, then I think we are in a better position to make progress and to move forward. Understanding that different belief systems manifest in different ways, and that is, and we can welcome that diversity, but at the same time not allow that diversity to impede the progress of growing together.
Thank you.
Universal spiritual truths are really very important to extract from all the trappings, isn't it? To be kind is good, to be cruel is bad, and that has to be a universal truth, surely, isn't it? Kind to all animals, to all living forms on the earth. And if you deny that, then you are in trouble. You end up with world wars and so on in the limit.
I think this point is very important, because really speaking, in the context of spirituality, there is no differentiation between a human being or any other creature for that reason. Because Isha Vashmidam Sarvam Yat Kinchat Jagatyam Jagat. And as Guru Maharaj Ji has said, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnash Purnamevaya Purnameva Vashishate is not in the context of only human beings, but in the context of the whole creation. And therefore, this idea of differentiation between the humans and non-humans, or plants and animals, and considering that we are at the center of the creation, is a misnomer. And that's where I think many of the religions have fought with each other and trouble has been created. But as we move now into the deeper layers of our understanding of a new world, I think it's very important for us to go back to the basics, where Sarve Bhavantu Sukhna Sarve Shantu Niramaya was in fact the context of the spiritual wisdom. And I think there's great convergence in that respect is to be achieved. But synthesis between science and spirituality will bridge that bridge, which is absolutely necessary to comprehend this part of survey as against the superiority of the human beings as has been thought for a very long time.
So thank you, sir. As we are running out of time, actually the discussion is very wonderful. So we would like to hear more and more. So before closing this session, I would request all of you just in one line, can you please share your experience? It could be your personal experience with Dr. T.D. Singh or the work of the Dr. T.D. Singh that has inspired you. So just in one line to all of the esteemed panel members.
Yeah, I would start by saying that I think the message is that one should respect all life on the planet and all life in the universe. And I'm reminded of a statement that I heard. I don't know if this is true of Buddhist scriptures or not, but I heard that if you, someone I think made this statement, if you kill a rabbit, stop and think that that rabbit might have been your best friend in a previous birth. Right.
Yes.
I mean, that's sort of allegorical, but I think it sort of highlights the connection between all life and all spirituality.
Professor Sharma?
For me, the best part of Swamiji was, he was a true magician, I would say. It will work wonders to anyone who comes to his contact, and he would mesmerize you and purify your mind and thought process and will draw you towards that spiritual bliss, which is what, in fact, the domain of a spiritualist. I was so happy to meet him way back in 2005 and at Delhi College of Engineering and receive his blessing. So I have my highest regard for his magic touch, like a magician, transforming an individual totally to be drawn towards the purity of mind, and purity of thoughts, and purity of actions. And that's what exactly spirituality is all about. And once that happens, you are having hotline of connectivity directly with the God Almighty. And this is what exactly the magic touch which Dr. T.D. Singh ji had. So our greatest respect to his lotus feet. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Rosario.
I would say that it was his humility, his extreme and true humility that attracted people to talk to him and engage with him, knowing that their opinions matter, it's just his caring personality imbued with humility and respect. I will pass it on to Dr. Goyal.
Yes, I would like to conclude that Professor T.D. Singh inspired the next generation of scientists. I am also aspiring to be a spiritual scientist like him, aiming to synthesize science and spirituality, and especially he's the one who showed us that science does not have all the answers. For scientists like me, he is one of the inspirational thinkers who showed that science does not have all the answers, and we can gain a lot of knowledge from our ancient traditions like the Bhagavad or the Vedic traditions, Buddhist traditions, and we can take in a lot of knowledge from those traditions, and they have a lot of answers which science cannot provide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all the gentlemen. And it's been pleasure to have all of you. And we are really enriched to see all of you in this panel. And I now request our Deepankar ji, please, is there any photo for this session or screenshot?
I think we already took them while.
Okay, so thank you so much. And I would now request our moderator to take other session, continue. And thank you everyone. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Much. All the panelists and moderator, thank you so much for this wonderful, thoughtful session. So this thoughtful session would be followed up by a relatively lightening and relaxing cultural performance, which is a traditional Balinese dance. Just to say something about it, Puspanjali comes from the word Pushpa, which means flower, and Anjali, which means respect. This dance depicts a number of respectful women welcoming guests. So this dance was created by NLN Swasti Vijaya. She's the choreographer, and I Nyaman Vinda as the composer. And this is presented by Bali Ranganiketan. So thank you to the Bali Ranganiketan. And now we have a few quotes on synthesis of science and spirituality from Dr. Singh and other Nobel laureates. Yes, so now we'll quickly move on to our next panel session. And the theme of this session is Science and Interfaith Dialogue for World Peace, Dr. T.D. Singh's contributions in this. And for this session, we have in our panel, Reverend Charles P. Gibbs, Founding Executive Director, United Religions Initiative, Dr. Foo Chek Woo, Adjunct Associate Professor, National University of Singapore, past President, Interreligious Organization, Singapore, Dr. Amit Farid Ishaq, former Global Council member, United Religious Initiative, and Dr. Rodney Sebastian, Assistant Professor, Manhattan College. And the moderator of this session would be Aristotle Motinandi, Spiritan Renaissance International. So over to you, Aristotle ji.
Thank you, Dipankar. Well, a warm welcome to Reverend Charles Gibbs, Dr. Foo Chek Woo, Dr. Amir Farid Ishaq, and Dr. Rodney Sebastian. It's a pleasure meeting you via Zoom. So today, this panel session is on the Science and Interfaith Dialogue for World Peace. Maybe we could start off with Reverend Charles Gibbs on his views on this topic. Sir.
Thank you. It is such a joy to be here with old friends and friends I've yet to make, but am making in the process of this time. I'd like to thank the Love Knowledge Institute for sponsoring this great commemoration of the presence and contributions of Dr. T.D. Singh. The one invitation I would give us, noting that all the presenters in this program share my gender, would be to say that synthesis in life is not possible without the masculine and the feminine, the male and the female. It would be lovely to see that synthesis invited into our offerings, our reflections. I think we're always enriched that way. When this began, I was in deep darkness here in Texas. Some people say the state of Texas abides in some deep darkness, but physically it was dark. It's light now. And I happen to think that Dr. T.D. Singh, both as the scientist and a spiritual leader, must have had something to do with the light rising in the darkness. And I'm so grateful for him. He was a person with an open and inquisitive mind and an open and embracing heart. I think he was a person who lived humility and respect. And in doing that, I don't know if he would even agree with what I'm about to say, but I'll say it anyway because it's my understanding. He embodied, I think, a reality that all human knowledge is contingent. We need each other to find the biggest truth we can. And my experience of him during the years founding the United Religions Initiative and living into it, I saw him being a weaver who brought together people from different places to try to create a bigger understanding of who we were and why we were, where we came from and where we are. I'd like to share just a few words from the charter of the URI that he was so instrumental in helping to create, because they speak to the spirit of what we're talking about. We respect the uniqueness of each tradition and differences of practice and belief. We respect. We value voices that respect others and believe that sharing our values and wisdom can lead us to act for the good of all. Therefore, as interdependent people, rooted in our traditions, we now unite for the benefit of our earth community, the benefit of the whole. And then we unite to celebrate the joy of blessings and the light of wisdom in both movement and stillness. We unite to use our combined resources only for non-violent, compassionate action to awaken to our deepest truths and to manifest love among all life in our earth community. Thank you, Dr. T.D. Singh, for being such an exemplar of those words.
Thank you, Reverend Gibbs, for that lovely presentation. May I just invite now Dr. Fu Chek Wu to please make your presentation. Dr. Fu, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, friends from this side of the world. The theme of this panel is intriguing. It is multidimensional between science and religion and multifaceted among multiple faiths. Yet it is precisely in this arena where a global synthesis is needed that the late Dr. T.D. Singh excelled in pointing the way forward. I did not have the privilege of meeting the man, but I know something of the spirit of that man from his Jnana, Kamal, and Bhakti yogas. In the few years prior to his passing, he authored and edited several books on this theme. And I commend that the audience at least revisit his book, Towards a Culture of Harmony and Peace, which is a compilation of several papers presented by physical and social scientists, politicians, and clerics at the International Summit held in New Delhi in 2003. I was also pleased to note that there were 2 papers in this book that were presented by members of the Baha'i faith. Truly multi-religious. In the introduction to this book, Dr. Singh wrote, and I quote, "Today, every thinking person feels an intense yearning for harmony and peace in every corner of the globe. The world is threatened by various forms of violence, such as nuclear war, chemical and biological warfare, terrorism, etc. Recent world events have created tremendous anxiety, fear, and unrest in the lives of all of us. How can we achieve peace in the midst of this turmoil?" Unquote. Well, we are now revisiting in this panel this theme. And to the etc., we have to add global pandemic and climate crisis, and the tremendous anxiety, fear, and unrest in all our lives have not been ameliorated. In fact, they have been accentuated in this time. Now, Baha'u'llah, prophet of the Baha'i faith, had emphasized that really the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. Now, Professor Ahmad Ziwa, the Nobel Laureate in chemistry, penned the following remarks in his paper in that book. And I quote, "Perhaps one day we'll develop a world governing system to ensure free human values." The political scientist Heinz Morgenthau, in his book, Politics Amongst Nations, argued that if mankind is to survive this inverted commas turmoil, it is necessary to establish a world state. But he came to the conclusion that there can be no world state without a world community willing and able to support it. Now, such a world community, I can imagine, will need to affirm that the central tenets of all religions have an underlying unity. And at the same time, as concluded by Dr. Singh in his own paper, a cooperative approach of science and spirituality is key to a world-lasting peace. So friends, I'm pleased to say today we have such a rudimentary world community established. The worldwide Baha'i community, in fact, is found in at least 100,000 localities in every country of the world. And based on Baha'u'llah's injunction to his followers to consort with concord and without discrimination with the adherents of all religions and the fundamental principle of the harmony of science and religion. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Fu, for your lovely presentation on the need for harmony and having a world community of where everything can be synthesized. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Amir Farid to please make your presentation, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the organization for inviting me to join in the commemoration honoring my godfather, Dr. T.D. Singh. I would like to share with you my journey with him. I only met him several times, but during those few encounters, it was enough for me to fall in love with him and he with me, that we were godfather and godson. I met him only in 1999, and I found him to be a man of religion, of spirituality, of culture and music. Humble man, a very approachable man, full of love and compassion, and always reaching out to humanity of all faiths and races. And it is through his interfaith work that our paths crossed, that he had come to Kuala Lumpur and brought the idea of URI, of which he was one of the founding leaders, as Reverend Charles has mentioned just now. And he, of course, convinced us to be part of the organization, so we became one of the charter members. At the same time, also, not only did I fall in love with the concept of URI, I fell in love with the ambassador that URI said, and that is Dr. T.D. Singh. And we got close because then he came again, bringing the cultural troops from Manipur to Kuala Lumpur. And it so happened I was also close with one of his assistants at that time, Brother Dina. It was only much later, actually, that I found out that he is a man of science, and not just a man of science. He's a towering personality in science, who pioneered dialogues about religion, science, and spirituality, and who had organized dialogues and interviews with some of the greatest living scientists. And it so happened to be an area of interest for me too. I'm a medical doctor, a devoted Muslim, practicing Muslim, and science and religion is also an area of my interest. So it's good to know. I was happy to know that my godfather is a champion of this field. So I'll just share what I feel he has done. We all remember the aphorism of Einstein when he said science without religion is lame and religion without science is blind. A local interfaith leader by the name of Dr. Jega, who was a leader of the local Sai organization, he had said that religion without spirituality is lame and spirituality without religion is blind. Very carefully, yeah? Einstein said science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. And Dr. Jega said religion without spirituality is lame, and spirituality without religion is blind. So what I see is Dr. T.D. Singh has beautifully shown us that science, religion, and spirituality need not be in conflicts as mentioned in the two aphorisms. He has shown to us that science, religion, and spirituality are in perfect harmony, provided we understand clearly each aspect and the wisdom that comes with each of those spheres of knowledge and life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Amir Farid, for that succinct conclusion about the synthesis of science and spirituality and how both are interwoven and dependent on each other. I'd like to now call upon Dr. Sebastian to deliver his presentation. Sir.
Thank you. So greetings, and it's from New York City. It's a cold winter morning here. Very happy to be invited to speak in this, very prestigious panel with many prestigious speakers. So greetings to everyone. I'm a student of Dr. T.D. Singh, and I had the privilege of studying some of his books and also hearing some of his lectures and talks and so forth. So I'm just going to present to him, to the audience, some of his contribution and thinking in connecting science and interfaith dialogue. So Dr. Singh was extremely forward-thinking and a pioneer in a suggestion that science should be included in interfaith dialogue. I think almost 30 years ago, he suggested this. And if you look at the way the world is going today, there are multiple roads that are inevitably leading to a deeper engagement with science in interfaith dialogue. So I've identified 3 roads in particular: the historical, the social, and the philosophical. I'm going to discuss each one of them. So first, from a historical perspective, if you look at the 17th to 19th century, the early scientists who were known as natural philosophers, like Newton, Robert Boyle, most of their work was influenced by theological objectives. For them, the practice of natural theology, that is called natural theology at the time, was an act of worship to better understand the mind of God. But then later, because of various reasons, mostly political, infighting in the church and so forth, there arose an antithesis with the separation of science from religion, especially after the works of Charles Darwin and Immanuel Kant as well. And in the last few decades, a group of people called the New Atheists, headed by Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, they appropriated science as a weapon to demolish religion and presented science and religion as being in conflict. However, we cannot let the New Atheists monopolize conversations about science and religion. Historically and logically, that wasn't the case, this conflict between science and religion, if you look at it. And if religious people allow the New Atheists to monopolize these conversations, then they risk being irrelevant to people who identify as being rational. And more recently, with efforts of pioneers like Dr. T.D. Singh, there seems to be a synthesis between science and interfaith dialogue, both through the Bhaktivedanta Institute and also other organizations like Templeton Foundation. Here, there's an engagement of science with diverse religious traditions in a non-dogmatic, non-sectarian way. And the historical trajectory, like Hegel suggested, first there's a thesis, then there's antithesis, and there's a synthesis. So the whole historical trajectory certainly points towards some sort of synthesis between science and interfaith dialogue. The second road I'm talking about is social. The social circumstances of today are begging for including science in interfaith dialogue. On one hand, there's been a rise of religiously motivated violence, and on the other hand, due to globalization, many of the world's largest cities are religiously and culturally diverse, and people of different backgrounds are in constant contact with one another. It makes sense for science and rational thinking to be included in the dialogue of religious traditions to mitigate radicalism, fanaticism, and religious conflicts, and to build bridges. In turn, religious wisdom can provide ethical guides for science. Ethics hasn't been able to keep pace with science, and therefore we need to incorporate religious wisdom to particularly mitigate adverse effects of scientific technology for the environment, in the internet world, warfare, bioengineering, animal experimentation, human experimentation, and so forth. And the third road is from a philosophical perspective, as was discussed in the earlier panel as well. From a philosophical perspective, the various religious traditions of the world, as well as scientific inquiry, share similar inquiries, such as why are we here? What is the relationship between us and the cosmos? How can we achieve peace and happiness? And in today's knowledge-based world, it makes perfect sense to put these questions at the forefront and to be open to exploring answers from multiple academic disciplines, as well as philosophical and theological traditions. One thing I want to add, however, in regards to interfaith dialogue, is that one of the negative aspects I've noticed in interfaith dialogue is that sometimes people use it as a platform for one-upmanship, to try and show that my religious tradition is better. In fact, the World Parliament of Religions in 1893 was in fact organized actually to show the superiority of Christianity. So rather than doing that in interfaith dialogue, different religious traditions must begin with a healthy respect and appreciation for one another, and have certain axioms or guidelines in place for the dialogue to be productive. And some of these axioms were actually expressed by Dr. T.D. Singh, and I want to share some of them here. Number one, all living beings, regardless of religion or ethnicity, are pure spirit souls or spiritual children of a common father or mother. And the spiritual father or mother is called by different names. However, we are in temporary material bodies and identifying ourselves with temporary designations, which creates a block in our spiritual unity. And second axiom is that there must be an understanding and awareness that the essence of all religion is to learn to love God. And third,
sorry to interrupt.
Dialogue should glorify the Lord together. It shouldn't just be on a dialogical platform. It should also involve glorifying the Lord together, regardless of one's religious or cultural affiliations. And fourth, both science and religious traditions should include an honest discussion of both the merits and limitations of the methodology and epistemology. So I'm going to end here. In summary, I spoke about Dr. T.D. Singh's vision of including science with interfaith dialogue and how it's relevant from a historical, social, and philosophical perspective, and also provided some axiom in which interfaith dialogue and science can be merged together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian. So can we have the slide on? We'll move on to the panel discussion now, as in all panelists being involved and sharing their thoughts. Can you please, can I draw your attention to the quote on the slide? The scientific knowledge of God will help the interreligious cooperation and understanding, thereby helping promote peaceful dialogue among different religious groups. And I think Dr. Charles, Reverend Gibbs mentioned earlier that we need to find the truth. We need each other to find the truth. And here we're talking about science and religion needing each other to help promote peace. So maybe you'd like to share your thoughts on it, gentlemen. Maybe we start with Reverend Gibbs, please.
My lucky day. I would like, in honoring Dr. Singh, I would like to include art and make it, in the Christian perspective, a trinity of science, spirituality, religion, and art, because he certainly brought art into it. And when I think, for instance, of music, I was on a memorial celebration just last night. I was up very late and then up very early to celebrate two giants. There was a woman playing a harp. And when you think about the science involved in music, and it's so manifest in a harp, the vibrational frequency of each string. And if you just have one string, that's nice, but after a while, it's very limited. It's all of the strings together. That's what I feel was, in my experience of him, at the heart of what Dr. T.D. Singh was about, was inviting us all to be strings on a celestial harp that had a scientific basis in the way we vibrate, and a spiritual and an artistic basis in the way we vibrate, and to recognize that all of that is needed to make the whole. And when we make music together, there can be harmony. When we don't, we forfeit that possibility, and we look, and we've heard eloquently about the challenges of this time and place. We have discord, division, and the challenges that in large measure we've created for ourselves go unaddressed because we're too busy fighting with each other than coming together with our best knowledge from every domain to make music. And maybe just one last thing. I need to confess that my grounding in science is that I broke almost every beaker in the chemistry lab when I was a chemistry student, and I nearly flunked physics. So I really need scientists to complete my very incomplete understanding of things.
Dr. Fu or Dr. Sebastian, Dr. Amir Farid would like to add to what Reverend Gibbs had just said?
Yeah, I have some comments here on this particular quotation.
Okay.
You know, in religion, generally, the essence of God is unknowable. I mean, you know, to think that the Creator knows the Creator is a presumptuous thought. And by definition, you know, the chair will never know the carpenter. So basically, when you talk about knowledge of God, it is really to understand really the attributes of God, which is manifested in prophets like Krishna, Muhammad, Christ, Baha'u'llah, etc. And this is the knowledge we really need to assess. And it is really important now at this time and juncture where we have really a global village for all humanity, whether of the science persuasion or not, to really examine some of the writings of these great people, which you cannot deny, which have followers to the tune of 1.6 billion. You know, science cannot claim such following. So I really think that the issue more is with religion coming to a basic understanding first, and knowing really what are the essential underlying unity of religion. Many have put it down as spirituality. I agree, but do not forget that religion also evolves like everything else on this earth. You know, the art has evolved. And we should therefore expect religion to evolve as well and to appreciate what really are the underlying unity and basic facts about the importance of us having human values. So I do feel that knowledge is important, but the knowledge of God really is not something we should be looking for. And I'm sure science will never discover it. Thank you very much.
Dr. Dr. Amir?
Yeah, if I may, I just want to add that how, like Dr. Singh talked about including science in interfaith dialogue, one of the advantages of that is that if we develop a sort of or in the process of developing a scientific definition for, qualities like forgiveness, humility that are spoken about earlier, and then, draw to add to the definition, draw from various religious traditions. So you have a sort of a sharing so that you have a holistic understanding of some of these qualities. And even conducting experiments, like how is a person affected psychologically by forgiving, and so on and so forth. So so really I think that adding science to the conversation amongst different religious traditions brings in this fresh, objective sort of, definition, which can add to the conversation to understand these concepts like divinity, forgiveness, humility, and so forth better.
Dr. Amir?
May I say something?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So in our lives, the basis of law, and we all are ruled by law in our lives, and the basis of law is evidence. The basis of science, and we are governed by a lot of things that are science and scientific. The basis of science is evidence. And I say that, in medicine, everything is now is evidence-based medicine. Everything is based on medicine. So with that quote about the scientific understanding of God, it would be very, very interesting if those who are pursuing this subject pursue into evidence-based theology, evidence-based understanding of what God is. Why would this be interesting? Just to reflect on this fact that whilst all our religions teach peace and love and respect for others, but the reality on the ground is there's a lot of conflicts between the peoples of the different religions, right? And after many, many years of reflection, I have come to this conclusion that the biggest reason of why the Muslim and the others and the others and the Muslim and the Muslim and the Christian, the Hindus, why there is not the love between them that our religions teach. The biggest reason is that we dispute and quarrel over who and what God is, and forget about what whoever this God is wants us to do. Right? Your God tells you to love me. My God tells me to love you. But because we disagree on who God is, I forget about that and I fight you, I quarrel with you. Most of the time, it is that the dispute on the ground is never on the differences on how we worship, or how we celebrate our festivities, or how different are our marriage ceremonies, or all those things do not cause conflicts. The conflict is you say God is so and so, and I disagree, and that's the start of the veil between us. Yeah. So it is good if we can try to solve the problem, right, by trying to scientifically approach this issue of
of trying to understand God. But of course, it is a dangerous pursuit if the people trying to engage do not first have a solid grounding on the teachings of the religion, which is first respect the opinions of others, even if they differ from you, right? And if any further discussion would lead you to quarrels and fighting, stop, right? The purpose is never to cause more disharmony between us. It is better to have our different understanding of God and live in peace and harmony than pursue to try to have a common understanding, but end up fighting in that pursuit. All right, so I am all for a scientific investigation towards a better scientific understanding of God. With that premise, that I feel that if we have a better a common understanding of God, there'll be less conflicts on the ground. But I'm sure between those who have the right understanding of our respective religions, there is no issue, right? I love you, Rodney. I love you, Mr. Fu. Charles, no, I love him very much because we know each other for many years. But that is not, so the fact that we have different religions and with different understanding of God has not stopped me, and I hope has not stopped you all from loving each other. But that's not the story on the ground. We know many followers of our respective religions just cannot and refuse to love people of other religions. So we have to help them. We have to help them, right? And how to help them is by convincing them of the unique nature of God, that you may have different understanding, but remember, whoever he is, whatever he is, or she is, or it is, he wants us to live in peace and harmony, loving one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Amir Farid. We just have a minute left on this panel. Maybe we go around the room and maybe in a sentence or in a word, how would you describe the need for this work by Dr. T.D. Singh on including science in the dialogue between religions? Maybe you could start with Dr. Fu.
Yeah, very quickly. As I mentioned, never had the privilege of meeting him, but clearly he has pointed the way forward. And I commend that, the friends who are here, please really read through some of his books because they are truly illuminating. Thank you very much.
Perhaps Reverend Gibbs?
Dr. Singh, in my experience, was a living embodiment of what I understand namaste to mean. And I believe that we all need to aspire to that, whether we see ourselves in a religion, as spiritual, as scientists. We need that deep bow to each other and recognize that we need each other. We need to cooperate, not be in conflict. We can disagree without creating conflict that spirals out of control. We need to strive for the greatest, highest, most deeply valued synthesis we can. And I believe that's what his life was about. And I daily accept that as an invitation to me to try to up my game to match his.
Dr. Sebastian?
So, there are three, in terms of interfaith dialogue and science, there are three qualities which Dr. Singh embodied, which I think we can sort of transfer into the larger context of dialogue between science and different religious traditions. And they are, one, inclusivity, to be inclusive and broad-minded, to bring everyone to the table. And number two, sincerity of purpose. We must have a proper understanding of why it is that we want to engage in dialogue. What is the purpose of it? And the purpose must be sincere. And number three is honesty, to be honest about the limitations of both the scientific methodologies and epistemologies, as well as religious philosophy and theology. So 3 things. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Amir Farid.
I feel that in commemorating him tonight, it is very important that we support the continuance of his work. So in that manner, I think we all are here to offer the Bhaktivedanta Institute any help, any assistance, any participation that you may want us to do, because we owe it to him to continue his legacy. That's what I want to say.
Thank you so much, Reverend Gibbs, Dr. Fu, Dr. Amir Farid, Dr. Sebastian. It was a pleasure. God bless. Hand over to the mic to Deepankar. Deepankar, over to you.
Yes, I was not able to unmute myself, sorry. So yes, wonderful session, and thank you all the panelists and our moderator. Since we are lagging a bit behind the schedule, we would directly start our third panel session. And indeed, that was second panel session was amazing. And the theme of our next panel session is the study of consciousness in understanding the nature and origin of life and its implications. And also Dr. T.D. Singh's contributions is what we're looking for in it. So we have an amazing list of panelists. We have Dr. Amit Goswami, retired professor, University of Oregon. We have Dr. A.K. Mukhopadhyay, former professor, AIMS, New Delhi. Professor Matthew Chandrakunal, director, Ecumenal Christian Center, and Professor Ram Gopal Upaluri, professor, IIT Guwahati. And this session would be moderated by Dr. Nikhil Bhatt, principal, CFD consultant, Broadtech Engineering Limited. So I would like to hand over to our moderator, Dr. Nikhil Bhatt, please.
So I would like to thank all the organizers for giving me this opportunity. And I'm indeed honored to be in this as a moderator for this panel discussion, because this panel discussion consists of very eminent panelists who have spent significant years of their life exploring consciousness. So we have Dr. Amit Goswami, who is formerly from the University of Oregon and is currently the director at the University at the Center of Quantum Activism. Then we have Professor A.K. Mukhopadhyay, who is formerly from AIMS, and is also currently involved in exploring consciousness and its application in different areas. Then Dr. Matthew Chandrakunal is currently a director at the Ecumenical Christian Center and also professor of science and philosophy at the Christ University, Bangalore. And then we have Professor Ram Gopal Upaluri, who is the director, who is the professor at IIT Guwahati. And he has spent a lot of his time exploring the interface of science and spirituality, especially in the areas of consciousness, origin of the universe, ethics, just to name a few. So to start the discussion, I would like to invite Professor Amit Goswami. Sir, you can start first.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to say something about T.D. Singh, because I had so many wonderful discussions with him about consciousness and life and how it finally can be treated with science, with quantum physics. The challenge for consciousness research has always been that, starting with Newton, we had wonderful theories about all of objects, things that we experience. How does one include in Newton's law or in quantum laws, when it was first conceived, certainly it was not at all clear, how does one include the experiencer? And then when the message of quantum equations of movement became clear, we were astounded. Niels Bohr and others got a glimpse of it, especially Heisenberg, because they kept saying that We cannot understand quantum physics without letting the subject in. There is a subject-object mix-up somehow, but they are still very hesitant. Von Neumann was the first one to suggest that, look, we are dealing with webs of possibility, and these webs of possibility obviously need something outside of quantum physics, because to resolve possibility into actuality, matter cannot do it. That is called von Neumann's mathematical theorem. Matter cannot do it. Matter only converts superpositions of possibilities into other superpositions of possibility, material interactions. So that's the beginning of consciousness, because von Neumann himself suggested that observer does it. I won't go into the details of measurement theory, but of course there are paradoxes, because if it is individual consciousness, the killing paradox is the paradox of who gets to choose if there are two observers looking at the same quantum event. So possibilities are collapsing into actuality, but whose actuality? Obviously, my choice and your choice could very well be different. So for Neumann's idea of consciousness collapsing, observer's consciousness collapsing doesn't really work. So there is a big gap. 30 years it took to solve the problem. I finally did, and the solution was very mystical. Solution was that the choice is ultimately all done by one consciousness, the oneness that spiritual traditions have been talking about since millennia, perhaps even as early as 7,000 years ago in the Indian Vedanta literature. So if consciousness is the ground of all being, and matter, mind, all these things, archetypes, vital energies, all are possibilities of consciousness to choose from, then certainly we not only can understand human consciousness, but also very primitive consciousness, like that of a single living cell. We know that one thing is common between a single living cell and us. We have the ability of experiencing ourselves separate from the object, but so does the living cell. This is one of the primary objectives, and materialists don't deny it. They just say that somehow it follows from material dynamics, which of course, I just said, it cannot, because material interactions cannot change quantum possibility into actuality, and all things must start from quantum possibilities, including life. So the question was that, of course, something sophisticated like brain, it's easy to see how our self-reference or self-identity can come about, because brain is a complex machine, and we can see that it has a perception apparatus, it also has memory apparatus, and to suggest that there is a relationship here which is circular, and that creates a trap for consciousness, it was not difficult for me when I got the basic idea that integrates science and spirituality. But here the challenge was somewhat different, because the single cell don't have that much of complexity. In a way it does, because the problem is still, of course, outstanding, and the protein and DNA molecules, they're so complex things that there is complexity in the molecules themselves. But as a whole, the body, there is a circularity between protein and DNA also that makes the origin of life explanation very difficult for molecular biology. But aside from that, how does a cell experience reality in a moment like we do?
Sorry, Professor Goswami, can I interrupt? But we are running short of time. So are you able to just summarize? Yeah, thank you.
Just
Yeah.
one more minute to finish this sentence.
Thank you. Yeah.
So how does one do it? This is where Bruce Lipton had an idea that a single cell does have cell membrane, and there may very well be proteins that could perceive in a very rudimentary way. And of course, there is plenty of water in the cytoplasm of a cell, which can make memory. So in that way, I was able to explain the interaction of memory and perception and how that gives even a single cell this ability of experience itself separate from the environment. So life, according to quantum physics, is all an explained phenomenon. Of course, the details still have to be worked out. Darwin's theory has to be made compatible with the rest of the biological sciences. So lots of work remains, but I'm very glad that these developments have taken place. Sometimes I do wonder if I could have another conversation with T.D. Singh and how he feel about all this.
Thank you, Professor Goswami, for sharing your insights on the journey from Newtonian physics to quantum mechanics, and also some of your attempts to solve the fundamental problems in quantum mechanics, like the subject-object mix-up and quantum paradox. Thank you very much. Next, we would like to move to Professor A.K. Mukhopadhyay. Professor A.K. Mukhopadhyay, your time, please. Starts now. Yeah.
His Holiness Dr. T.D. Singh, distinguished panelist, and the distinguished scientist and the spiritualist in the audience. I met Professor T.D. Singh at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences when he came to deliver a lecture on science spirituality dialogue in 2004. Following that, we had some exchange of ideas and opinions, and we worked together from Department of Physiology to Department of Laboratory Medicine in my office. And there, we continued our dialogue for 3 more hours. Meanwhile, his disciples around, they have arranged a few books for me written by Dr. T.D. Singh. He presented me those books and then I presented mine. That was the only live encounter with him. Following this, within a year probably, or so, he passed away before that 2006 Puri conference. But that meeting actually bonded me with the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And since then, I have been invited almost all conferences of Bhaktivedanta Institute. Now, Dr. T.D. Singh's contribution is that the number one, that he sowed a seed of introspection to the material scientist and also ignited the flame of imagination of the spiritualist, that how this spirituality can be brought into the ambit of science. In the process, number two, he produced a counter-narrative consciousness rooted view of the world and the universe. And in this counter-narrative, he set up the hierarchy: consciousness, life, matter. Consciousness is the basic ground. Life comes the next in the ladder, and matter is at the bottom. During his travel throughout the globe, he connected so many wise minds of the world, brought them together. I think the most important contribution of his is that to stimulate the science students of India, particularly the IITians, many of those are in this group, for a future consciousness-centric and the life-centric science. Those who have read Krishna Upanishad, they know there are three fundamental questions. What is this world? What am I, or what are we? And what is God? Now, science takes care of the world. The humanity addresses the issues of who am I or who are we and how are we related. And the spirituality deals with what is God. Now, world has been craving for a new worldview, which combines these three: science, humanity, and spirit. Not just science and spirituality, science, humanity, and spirit. And Dr. T.D. Singh was an embodiment of that. He followed this paradigm of science, humanity, and spirit. Now, inspired by Srila Prabhupada and the famous Louis Pasteur quote on life, I will quote that Louis Pasteur. I have been looking for spontaneous generation of life for 20 years without discovering it. No, I do not judge it impossible, but what allows you to make it the origin of life? You place matter before life, and you decide that matter has existed for all eternity. How do you know that the incessant progress of science will not compel scientists to consider that life has existed during eternity and not matter? You pass from matter to life because your intelligence of today cannot conceive things otherwise. How do you know that in 10,000 years, one will not consider it more likely that matter has emerged from life?
Dr. Mukhopadhyay, I think the time is up. Sorry, we can continue in the panel discussion. If you want, you can just summarize.
Conclude that Dr. T.D. Singh argued with numerous simple evidence that the matter comes from life in his book, The Life and the Matter.
Thank you for your summary. And next, we would like to invite actually Mr. Dr. Chandrakant. He has said that he would like to play a video. So is the video available to play? Because he's unable to give a live presentation now. That's what he sent his message just now to me.
Yeah. Yes, it is available. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can you play, please? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to the 84th birthday celebration of Dr. T.D. Singh. Dr. T.D. Singh, who is also known as Srila Sripada Bhaktisvarupa Damodar Mahaswami. He is a great patron of science and spirituality and various other shades of disciplines. And 84th birthday is something very special for people from Kerala and all over India, that they say that, you know, we have already seen 1,000 full moons. So today, therefore, it will be a spectacular celebration of Dr. T.D. Singh. So Dr. T.D. Singh is someone who transcended from the critical, rational matter analysis to the faith-driven sciences of the soul. As we were together in many conferences internationally and nationally, what I found in him, a very humane, smiling face, a man of simplicity, and dance at the local society initiative conferences in US, through which he has danced into the life and soul of every individual. I have seen constant companions like Vasudhara Rao, technologist, and many others like Swami Jitendal, and who influenced many youngsters who were into studying in the IITs. Dr. T.D. Singh's contributions to science, spirituality, and shades in between. He handled a wide variety of topics. The range of his intellectual capability was wide. And today I just want to concentrate on Dr. T.D. Singh's contributions to consciousness. He had contributed to many, and we have seen many others were also speaking on various other topics, and this session is on consciousness, life, and other situations. But I am just concentrating on consciousness. Consciousness is the most unknown subject, though we carry it on our head and body. There were attempts from the Vedas, Upanishads, to Descartes, Freud, Jung, Adler, quantum mechanics, Penrose, artificial intelligence, neurophysiology. So many were contributed in understanding this consciousness. Dr. T.D. Singh has had the opportunity to interact with the masters in this field in his attempt to grasp this conundrum. Nobel laureates like John Nicholas, Penrose, and researchers like Karl Pribram, Hemroff, and spiritual masters like Srila Prabhupada, etc. In 1990 onwards, Dr. T.D. Singh tried to focus on consciousness and organized international conferences in California and many places in India. Understanding consciousness, T.D. Singh took no stones unturned. He incorporated all fields of knowledge, sciences irrespective of hard and spiritual sciences, and all comprehensive, holistic, and integral search for consciousness. He had opened up towards the reality of consciousness, not with a narrow perspective, but with a wider horizon, even including the meditative spiritual awakening, which many materialist, atheist scientists will be negating, would be the salient feature of T.D. Singh's methodological approach. The duty of his followers, disciples, and friends at this moment is to continue this esteemed legacy of this research approach or methodology, because 21st century is the century of consciousness, and we have seen that great people, businessmen like Elon Musk, they were incorporating companies like Neuralink, who brings the human consciousness with artificial intelligence, and that is the hallmark of this 21st century. So what is our duty? To be a catalyst to bring more and more enthusiastic researchers to this great enigma called consciousness, to create a consciousness consortium in India so that the research in this field of consciousness could be shared among the researchers. Dr. T.D. Singh, Srila Sripada Bhaktisvarupa Damodar Swami is therefore a beacon for humanity, and let us carry the torch he has lighted for the next generation. This is my prayer on the occasion of his birthday celebration, and it is my wish, and I call upon his followers, disciples, and friends at this moment to continue this his esteemed legacy towards the 21st century and to understand this enigma of consciousness. Thank you. I take this opportunity to give tributes to Dr. T.D. Singh, and also thank Swami Jidundal and Swami Vasudeva Rao and all the others who had organized this program and inviting me for this program. Thank you. Wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Matthew. We now move on to Professor Ram Gopal, please.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing that I would like to convey to all the esteemed panelists and my friends researching in consciousness or trying to understand consciousness is that even if as a scientist, I try to present analogies between the quantum reality and the consciousness, the brain states, the fact remains that consciousness will eternally going to remain as a puzzle. The reason is the analogy given by Thomas Nagel called Nagel's bat, which conveys that if I try to become a bat, I lose my existence as a human being and I acquire the qualities of the bat. So therefore, the quality of human being are lost and the quality of bat are achieved. So therefore, this consciousness is going to be a highly subjective domain. And what Dr. T.D. Singh has really given us is a unique platform by which we can explore some of the attributes which I would like to present. The first thing that he has always emphasized, even in his writings, especially this famous book called Life, Matter and Their Interactions. In the last concluding section, he conveyed that the study of science at the best can indicate that there exists consciousness, but it cannot prove that definitely consciousness exists. That means it's like, it's indicating that, quantum reality is indicating that consciousness exists. But what exists as consciousness, quantum reality can't convey. Because the thing is, according to Vedanta, consciousness is beyond the scope of even quantum reality. Quantum reality indicates giving a systemic definition of the spiritual with the material. And according to Vedanta, the material cannot represent the spiritual. I mean, in other words, if you look at Bhagavatam, in Bhagavatam, it is stated that the soul, when it is in the three modes of material nature, the soul acquires the properties of the three modes, but that does not mean that the soul is, it can be explained through the three modes. So therefore, this subjective objective duality is going to remain forever. And when we very minutely study the books of Dr. T.D. Singh, like for example, in this book called Essays on Science and Religion, the very first image he puts is an embryo. And there's a beautiful quote. He says, there is an element of rationality which is beyond the scope of the modern science. That means we may try to understand consciousness, but the fact remains that whatever propositions and equations that we are trying to come up, it's going to remain silent. The biggest challenge that I would like artificial intelligence researchers and scientists to take is to guide a PhD student. Yes, exactly. Because I've been guiding PhD students and I know what sort of subjective, emphasis needs to be given. The degrees of freedom are beyond the scope of mechanistic intelligence when you guide a PhD student. And there are a lot of human factors. There are a lot of, saintly qualities such as compassion that needs to play a critical role here rather than mechanizing the entire guidance of a student. So to my belief, in summary, I would say Dr. T.D. Singh's contribution is very unique, that yes, science shall be studied, but we should always remember that it has a limited scope to understand consciousness exactly, because quantum physics or any subject of science is only a matter representation, and matter representation cannot exactly define things. That's first thing. The second thing is, even if we are able to understand life in ourselves, life in animals or life in, babies, consciousness is not understood. If you take the case of embryo, in the case of embryo, it is stated that the embryo requires a cortex to even feel a pain. But there are other people who opine that even if it has a cortex, there is no guarantee that the embryo is experiencing a pain. So having cortex is only a necessary condition, but it is not sufficient condition. So given this divide, I strongly agree with Professor George Wald's statement that even if science advances, this fundamental issue of consciousness is going to remain as it is, and science will never be able to resolve this issue. That's it from my side. So these are some of the unique things Dr. T.D. Singh gave. And when we are actually accepting these things, then automatically the domain for spirituality opens up. But if we think that some representation of science or its variation is going to give room for spirituality, I think it's only conditional, and it's not going to give a very strong emphasis towards the spiritual paradigm, which is beyond science, which is beyond philosophy, and which is, beyond any conditioned state of existence. That's all from my side.
So thank you, Professor Ram Gopal. And I would like to thank all the esteemed panelists for their wonderful insights. So we can move to the discussion stage. Okay, so the topic for discussion is, by careful study of science, one can appreciate that consciousness is beyond matter, which is the conclusion of the spiritual traditions. So I would like the panelists to share their thoughts on this quote, that how science can be used to appreciate or understand that consciousness is beyond matter, and possibly infer that basically consciousness is, yes, it is beyond matter. So I would like to start with Professor Goswami, please. Oh, he's not in the panel. So maybe I can call on Dr. A.K. Mukhopadhyay to share his thoughts in a few sentences, maybe, because we just have like 5 or 6 minutes. Yeah, for the entire panel. Sorry about that. Yeah.
The material science. You see, we do not talk about science. Science includes everything. If you have logic, you can go. So it is spiritual science. So the material science ends in 0-point energy or the quantum void. You extend it to quantum fields. It ends there. But following that, what Dr. Goswami raised that point, that who is collapsing the wave? So that is consciousness. What Dr. Ramagopal said, that science can sense that there is a consciousness, but cannot explain it. I think that I will stop now.
Okay, so can we move on to maybe Professor Ram Gopal to share his insights?
Yeah, so, I can give you an analogy here. See, quantum world. The quantum world tells us about the quantum tunneling. The quantum world tells us about sudden creativity. See, all these analogies are good, but can you exactly represent the brain as a complex quantum wave function? The answer is no. Because quantum physicist does not bring in biology, and biology brings in free will. Because every cell has its free will. If you take microorganisms, when you feed something to microorganisms, they may eat, they may not eat. So that's why you see any microorganism experiment, you need to do many trials and you need to assure that you're following the proper protocols. So the degrees of freedom are much, much complex in a biosystem in compared to the quantum system. In a quantum system, you have only a physical system at existence. Whereas in a biological system, the free will of the living being also comes into picture. So therefore, for example, let's say, someone has cancer in the body. But if this person is meditating, for quite some time, then the cancer may not spread that seriously. Meditation plus food habits and all these things, like remaining in goodness. So, the consciousness can affect the cell, metabolism, cancer cell metabolism also. So these are certain issues that are beyond the scope of the mechanistic science. Yes, but so you can analyze all these things by coming to this thing. So I take analogy from our Bhagavatam. In Bhagavatam, if you go to 7th canto, 7th chapter, 23rd verse, there is a phrase that says, Neti Neti Atatyajan. So here, the sages are saying that how do you separate the soul from matter? And the answer given is, Neti Neti means you say, this is not it, this is not it. So therefore, we have to quantify it. The soul is not mind, that the soul is not intelligence, that the soul is not quantum combinations, that the soul is not DNA, that the soul is not RNA. So like that, we have to extend the properties of the soul in a negative paradigm towards the matter and the complex matter-life interactions.
Prof. Ram Gopal, sorry, but we are running short of time, and I would also like Professor Matthew to add in his insights. So Professor Matthew. Yeah. In a short time.
Yes, I am very happy to be contributing to the other panelists, which they have already spoken, and Ram Gopal and Dr. A.K. Mukhopadhyay, and also Amit Goswami. Well, what I can say is that, in the 18th century, the famous philosopher Immanuel Kant divided the reality into noumena and phenomena. So what science can teach us today is about the phenomena, and what about the noumena? I think we have not have so much of methodology for that processes. So I think that may be a methodology which today we are celebrating the birthday of Dr. T.D. Singh. So as in the West, we have the cognitive science. In the cognitive science, they are incorporating mathematics, computer science, artificial intelligence, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, meditation, and all. So maybe when we are studying consciousness, we cannot simply define into mere material sciences, but we have to incorporate a comprehensive and a holistic account of whatever possible ways. And this is what I am absolutely sure that Dr. T.D. Singh was bringing together. So he was a hardcore scientist, and then he was also a spiritual person, and this wide range in his own consciousness he was fusing, and he was trying to develop. So if we look into the book Consciousness, which he has written, there you can find that how he was interacting with many of those great scientists. And in my practice as a hypnotherapist, I found that, I can put a person into a deep trance. So whatever problems, psychosis or neurosis, we can heal a person, and the suggestions in that deep trance given as audio signals will be converted into visual signals. Where does it happen? How it happens? So these are some of the things really I am actually looking into, and some researchers from Nimhans and all are also working. So I think
Professor Matthew, sorry, only a minute more. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, this way of a comprehensive way, which Dr. T.D. Singh has shown to us, and I think this is what we have to develop. And maybe I would suggest that the Bhaktivedanta Institute can have a consortium of consciousness researchers. So this would be my suggestion.
Thank you all for your wonderful insights. And I would like to invite all the panelists, maybe beginning with Professor Matthew, give maybe a word or two about your experience with Dr. T.D. Singh, since we are honoring him. Yeah.
Yeah, there are two things which I noticed through our interactions. He was a person of broad smile, and he was ready to dance. So these are the two things I have noticed. And then I can now say that he was choreographing the physical, the psychical, and the pneumatic in his own personality.
Thank you. Dr. A.K. Mukhopadhyay, please.
Yes, Dr. T.D. Singh was a great human being first. And then he had that science background, or he is a scientist, and he is an accomplished spiritualist. So I will say that he was an embodiment of the science, humanity, and spirit paradigm.
Thank you. Professor Ram Gopal, please.
He is a man of simplicity and humility. I have never seen a person like him in my entire life, with such humility and simplicity.
That really sums it up very nicely. So I'd like to thank all the panelists for this presentation. A big thank you to all of you. And I would like to now hand over to the moderator. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such a wonderful panel discussion. And thank you so much, Nikhil Bhatt, for moderating this session. Without any delay, we move on to our next session, which is a quotes on peace and harmony for humanity. So we'll have a short video on these quotes. Thank you. So now coming up, we have a very interesting session where we have a young and aspiring scientist, budding scientist, talking about Dr. T.D. Singh, who has got his association in a bit indirect way. So I'd like to invite Roshan Tiwari, research scholar from ISA Kolkata, to present a talk about this.
Yeah. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks. So thanks, Dipankar, for your introduction. And first of all, I would like to thanks Bhaktivedanta Institute for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share some words on how Dr. T.D. Singh is an inspiration to budding scientists. And in this presentation, I would share my personal life events on how he inspired me and the whole generation of budding scientists. So just after, so can someone?
Can you click on your screen, then you can have the access. Yes, now you can use it.
Yeah. The screen is not very much visually. I'm not able to. Yeah, now it's fine. Wait. Yeah.
The keys to go up and down here.
So from my personal experiences, just I would like to share a small event. Like just after finishing my schools, I found myself in a very rat race competition. Like in our country, as you can see, like many other youths in our country, they go through the same rat race to build their career. Okay, and like rat race for better career, better packages for money, and there are many attractives are there. So something I realized is the facts that our entire youth is not exposed to the reality. We are told, we as a youth are told to work hard, earn money, but still the goalpost for being satisfied is move further. So that's what in my life, after toiling hard for some years, after my 12th standard, the feeling of fear and anxiety and hopelessness was still lurking into my heart. I don't know, but I needed something. I was very confused at that time. So one day, I was in I was studying in Banaras Hindu University at that time, doing my graduation there. So one day I saw AISSQ banner. AISSQ means All India Science Spirituality Quest, which is organized by Bhaktivedanta Institute. And this conference has been introduced by Dr. T.D. Singh to be organized every year. So one day I saw the AISSQ banner in BHU, and I was really unaware about the conference. And then I found a big bus out there with the quotes of scientists written on there, like Einstein, Max Planck. So these quotes are really, they attracted me a lot and made me think about how even a scientist appreciate God and talk about his spirituality. So these buses, which were introduced by Dr. T.D. Singh himself, this bus used to carry books of Dr. T.D. Singh, and they used to visit every many universities and colleges in India. So that bus is really the starting point for me. And then the other thing which I liked about is that science and spirituality. More often, there are many misconceptions about spirituality, that you need to leave everything and go to forest, this and that. But how to get balanced, that I learned. So the term science and spirituality was very new to me at that time. I never thought that science can be used in conjugation with spirituality. So that was really very new thing for me. So after completing my bachelor's, I got admission in ISER Kolkata. And after a year of struggle for survival, I got some backlogs there. So I came to know about Bhaktivedanta Institute Study Center near my college. And there I got connected to the students of Dr. T.D. Singh. So this was the vision of Dr. T.D. Singh, to have such study centers in India where students can spend their time and associate with the scholars of the science of Vedanta. So there I got connected with different people, different students of Dr. T.D. Singh, and science and values of Vedanta introduced by Dr. T.D. Singh have improved my life remarkably. I also noticed a change in the character of my friends, developing higher values and virtues of life. Now they are more interested in understanding and being introspective of the meaning and purpose of life. Before, they were too much involved in pursuing material goals, these and that, but now they are very serious about their goals, purpose of life. They have turned around from self-centeredness to more selflessness for a higher cause. Another very important thing which inspired me is Dr. T.D. Singh books. They are really an eye-opening for me, exposing me to a new world of knowledge. Like in our daily life, in our modern education system, we used to get more encouragement in materialism, and now the conception of life has as a competition is it's a goal of today modern education, to make everything in a very competitive approach, so making the education as a profit and loss game. Some proper this yeah. So because of this, a lot of you know that many social and emotional ills are happening, like suicides, depressions, and all these things. There is no space for understanding about the self. That is a very important thing. So Dr. T.D. Singh books really a very is like a oasis in the desert. They give you an idea about all these broader perspectives of life. And Dr. T.D. Singh books cover many areas apart from science, like they talked about consciousness and spiritual evolution. So these are really going to this have benefited me and many fellow students who are pursuing science. Apart from that, these are the syllabus which we are never taught in schools. So it's like Dr. T.D. Singh books giving us a complete information, complete knowledge. You can say that. And moreover, a lot of conferences and summer schools organized by Bhaktivedanta Institutes, they have been introduced by Dr. T.D. Singh, like All India Science and Spirituality Quest, which I already told you. So in our academic world, we mostly concerned with the conferences are concerned mostly with the scientific topics. But here, Dr. T.D. Singh introduced both scientific and spiritual, both perspective we need to understand. So I have learned a lot of things personally, and from these conferences and summer schools, and we are allowed to interact with world-class scientists and monks to understand the deeper aspects of reality. I also met many students like me who were interested in the field of science and spirituality, inspired by Dr. T.D. Singh. From the personal life of Dr. T.D. Singh, young minds can learn a lot of things. For example, Dr. T.D. Singh forsook a lucrative and prestigious career to advance a higher cause. He has already had a job in US. He would have settled there, but to work for a higher cause, he selflessly worked for the welfare of humanity and inspired young minds to pursue higher knowledge and a holistic life. So this is really an inspiration for the youth. Last, I want to say that the works of Dr. T.D. Singh will inspire the coming generations for a long time. Many scientists will change their way of approaching science from materialistic to more holistic and inclusive way. So with this, I would like to there is some sorts of some pics where Dr. T. Singh interacting with the students. You can see he's going to colleges and interacting with the students. giving them guidance, a lot of things. So he has changed the entire generation, I personally think. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a moment. Okay. Thank you, Roshan Tiwari ji, for your sharing your experience and how you got inspired. Now, next we have video tribute by students in academia, and this is also a collection of small videos put together. All glories to His Holiness Bhaktisvarupa Damodar Swami Maharaj, also known as Dr. T.D. Singh in the scientific community. Dr. T.D. Singh has been a great source of inspiration to me in pursuing science and scientific research, along with little devotional service that I'm able to perform by the mercy of devotees. I would like to specially mention the impact of his books, which brought up a change in the perspective I look at science and scientific concepts now. These books gives us the immense and vast knowledge of Vedanta in very easy and simple scientific terms and its connection with the modern science. Today, on this auspicious day of the appearance of His Holiness Dr. T.D. Singh, I would like to remember him and thank him for all the motivation and inspiration he has provided through his books, his disciples, and the vision of Bhaktivedanta Institute. He has made me, and I believe all of us, realize how we can use our scientific skills and training in glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thank you very much.
This is Shrikant. I work at Max Planck Institute of Biology of Aging in Germany. It happened to me, I came in contact with Bhaktivedanta Institute and Dr. T.D. Singh's works and publications around late 2013. And these works actually inspired me to join Bhaktivedanta Institute, and then I spent approximately 3 years. This was the best thing happened in my life. Then when I look at closely and observe and carefully, going through Dr. T.D. Singh's works and publications and his qualities, and especially his disciples' qualities, these things has a strong impact on my professional life and personal life. It helped me in several ways. It has a very deep impact. One other thing, like apart from spirituality, the way I look at the scientific problems is completely changed. Before, there were certain statements I was looking for it, I think taking for granted, like origin of life and evolution or consciousness. The scientific statements, I took it for granted. But after spending time at Bhaktivedanta Institute and going through the Dr. T.D. Singh's works, I became more critical about the findings and these things. Think that how whatever knowledge we have, whatever profession we have, like a scientific profession, how we can actually contribute to the synthesis of science and spirituality. He already set a standards, like how we can actually, just following his footsteps, we can actually do that. And I'm a big fan of his writing style. He conveys his message very subtle way and a very delicate way, and I'm a big fan of his writing style, and that was it reaches all the academics very in nice way without any discomfort. This is a noble mission. I would like to support throughout my life.
First of all, I would like to thank the Bhaktivedanta Institute, Kolkata, for giving me the opportunity to speak on the influence of Dr. T.D. Singh's books and his works and the Institute on my personal life. So there is no doubt that Dr. T.D. Singh works and his books and the conferences like ASSQ has a lot of impact on my personal life and my professional career also. So I'm a PhD student about to complete from IIT Kharagpur, working on battery simulations. So I just started reading Dr. T.D. Singh's books on different aspects like life and its origin and some dialogues between the famous scientific personalities. So by reading those books, I was like astonished, like how one of the deepest topic like science and spiritual things are explained in a lucid language where any student can easily understand, and he can implement the same things in his research also by understanding the fundamentals of those topics. So this is how the books helps you in your professional life. And moreover, that one of the most important thing is like balancing that materialistic quest as well as a spiritual quest. It is one of the greatest output from these books. And here the best part is that the dialogue between two intelligent persons will lead to a clarity of the conclusion. Okay, so this is what we can find in the books. So the dialogues are not with any ordinary person, they are very stalwarts in their respective fields. So this is one of the greatest thing I can find in the books, and which are influencing in my research career as well. So apart from that, the ASSQ conference is a very good platform. Usually we cannot find such kind of a mature conference on science and spiritual quest, which is very rare topic in India especially. So I even suggest that everyone to just have a look into Dr. T.D. Singh's books, and you will definitely will like them, and it will definitely going to put a big mark on you, and you cannot forget the contribution of Dr. T.D. Singh.
I am Babu Ranjan Thakur. I have done my PhD from the Department of Aerospace Engineering, IIT Kharagpur. I think for us who are pursuing the scientific career and wish to have the spiritual fulfillment as well, no other person than Sripad Maharaj can be the motivation. His scientific caliber and spiritual advancement both are a kind of epitome in their own respect. And unfortunately, I didn't get to listen personally from Sripad Maharaj. However, I am equally fortunate to have the association of his esteemed disciples. And from their unmatched commitment to the mission of Maharaj, it is easy to have an idea about the Maharaj's impression upon them. And in all, I could find that Maharaj was extremely humble and very accommodative. Moreover, Maharaj's writing has always been a great source of inspiration for people, particularly from the scientific background, who easily get bewildered by the so-called scientific argument. For me, Maharaj and his disciples' life actually presents a live example of how the material pursuit can be a source of a spiritual enlightenment. He has guided us, and now the ball is in our court. I hope to take his words and life lessons sincerely. I thank all the devotees for this one opportunity and seek their blessing. And I also pray for the blessing of Sripad Maharaj. Thank you.
I'm Shashi Kumar, working as postdoctoral fellow in MD Anderson Cancer Center, Houston. It's my privilege to glorify Dr. T.D. Singh ji, who uplifted lives of many thousands of people. I have gone through his books and got convinced the importance of spirituality in this age of science to have a peaceful, happy and a successful life. I got attracted by many aspects and qualities of Sripad Maharaj. To mention a few are his peaceful and joyful appearance with his smiles and laughs, and his melodious kirtans and songs. His important contributions are his books having profound knowledge of science and spirituality explained in a simplified manner, which immensely benefited me. And I got attracted to his qualities like tolerance, patience and humility. The humility is very a special quality and a rare quality to see in a person who have achieved and contributed so much to the society, and he is never after any name or fame. That's a very special qualities that attracted me. I feel I'm blessed by Sripad Maharaj to grow personally and professionally. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to glorify a great soul, Dr. T.D. Singh.
Thank you so much for this, to all the budding scientists. And now officially we are at the end of our symposium today. So I would like to invite Sri Jitun Kumar Dhal, Director Bhaktivedanta Institute, Bhubaneswar, for his closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Am I audible, Dipankar ji?
Very clear.
Yeah, thank you, Dipankar. So, namaste, good evening to all and all. Respected chief guest, distinguished speakers, all the assembled students, scholars, audience and friends. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank you for your participation in this symposium honoring the life and works of Dr. T.D. Singh. I hope this event was both insightful and enjoyable for all of you. The success of the event is due to your presence and the hard work of all our dedicated members, as well as our supporters and volunteers. Firstly, we would like to thank our chief guest, Padma Bhushan Dr. Vijay Bhatkarji, Chancellor of Nalanda University, and distinguished speakers, Professor Chandra Bikram Singh from University of Buckingham, Professor Amit Goswami from University of Oregon, Professor P.V. Sharma, Amity University Vice Chancellor, Dr. A.K. Mukhopadhyay, formerly from AIMS New Delhi, Reverend Charles Grimes, Founding Executive Director of URA, Dr. Fu Chek Wu from NU Singapore and past President of the IRO, Dr. Amir Farid Ishaq, former Global Council member of URA, Father Matthew Chandrakunal, Director of Ecumenical Christian Center, Dr. Hector Rosario from the University of Florida, Dr. Ayush Goel, Texas AM University, Professor Ram Gopal Opulari, IIT Guwahati, and Dr. Rodney Sebastian of Manhattan College for kindly accepting our invitation and taking the time to share the valuable insights and wisdom. Next, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the cultural performers. First, we would like to thank Anuradha Devi Dasi for arranging the performance of the Bali Ranganathan group. We also like to thank Sachirani Devi Dasi for arranging the recordings and footage of Dr. T.D. Singh's cultural performance with Ranganiketan in the early years. We also like to thank Dasari Jagadishwar for kindly preparing the video, quotes, and tributes to Dr. T.D. Singh. Thank you all. Most importantly, we are extremely indebted to our visionary, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder and chair of Bhaktivedanta Institute, for being a constant source of inspiration. Before I conclude, I would like to say that I hope all of us present will carry Dr. T.D. Singh's message of harmony and peace through interfaith dialects and the synthesis of science and spirituality in whichever part of the world we are in and whichever community we belong. The spirit of cooperation in search for the ultimate truth is important for us all in order to achieve lasting peace and harmony, not only across culture of worldviews or countries, but also within ourselves. May God grant us the wisdom and strength to continue in this endeavor, which Dr. T.D. Singh has started and inspired us in more ways than one. So wishing you all a blessed weekend and an advance Merry Christmas and a happy advance New Year. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Stay well and stay safe. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chetan Kumar Dalji. And yes, thank you all for being here. And till now, we have a lot of people with us. And we are slightly above time. So I would like to please excuse us for that. And thank you all for your participation. We hope to see you in our future events. So this is an upcoming event of Bhaktivedanta Institute. It's AISSQ 2022 announcement. So it's mainly for young scientists, budding scientists. It's a national conference where we have speakers from all over the world. So those who are interested may please visit the site aissq.binstitute.org and take the information. So I wish you all a nice evening, good night, and nice time ahead.